She was still breathing when he found her barely, her blood turning the cracked asphalt dark beneath the broken streetlight. Detective Eva Marlowe, her badge still pinned to her chest, looked up at the man standing over her and whispered the only thing she had left. "Don't let them win." Damien Vale stared down at the one woman who had spent 3 years trying to put him in prison and felt something crack open inside his chest that had been sealed shut for over a decade. If this story hit you somewhere deep, subscribe to this channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The call came in at 11:47 on a Thursday night, and Damien Vale was not supposed to be anywhere near the industrial district. He had a meeting at midnight, a quiet exchange, 2 men, a parking garage on the east side, and he was already running late because Marcus, his driver of 6 years, had taken a wrong turn off Crane Street, and now they were cutting through the back end of Black Ridge's forgotten quarter, where the warehouses stood empty and the streetlights burned out one by one like dying stars. Damien was looking at his phone when Marcus hit the brakes. "Boss?" One word. That was all Marcus ever needed. Damien looked up. She was in the middle of the road, not standing, not walking. She was on the ground, one arm stretched out in front of her like she had been crawling and simply run out of strength. Her jacket was dark with blood. One side of her face was pressed against the asphalt, and even from 30 feet away, Damien could see the shallow, uneven rise and fall of her back. She was still alive. Barely. Marcus had already stopped the car. "You want me to call it in anonymously and keep moving?" Damien didn't answer right away. He was already reading the situation the way he had trained himself to read every situation: exits, risks, exposure angles. His eyes moved across the dark street. No other cars, no movement in the warehouses, no flicker of light from any of the windows on either side. Whoever had done this had done it cleanly and left without watching. That told him everything. "Leave the engine running," Damien said. He stepped out of the car. The cold hit him first, a sharp November cold that came off the river 2 miles west and carried grit with it. His shoes were expensive, and they made almost no sound on the broken asphalt as he crossed toward her. He crouched down beside her when he was close enough and put 2 fingers against the side of her throat. Her pulse was there. Faint, thready. But there. She made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a moan. Something caught between the two, and her fingers curled slightly against the ground. Damien moved his hand and turned her face gently toward him, just enough to see her clearly. He recognized her immediately. He would have recognized her anywhere. Detective Eva Marlowe, homicide, 7 years with Black Ridge PD. The woman whose case files his lawyer had walked him through twice in the past 18 months. Because she kept getting close, kept pulling threads that led in his direction, kept asking the right questions about the wrong people. She had almost had him 4 months ago. A witness she had tracked down in Harrow County, an old shipping manager who had seen things he shouldn't have seen. Damien's people had moved the witness before the deposition. Eva had shown up to the safe house address 40 minutes after they cleared out, and his lawyer had shown him a photo taken from across the street. Eva Marlowe, standing in the empty doorway, one hand on the doorframe, staring inside at nothing. She hadn't looked defeated in that photo. She had looked like someone who already knew she would find another way. And now she was bleeding out in the middle of a dead street in the industrial quarter, and Damien Vale was the only person who knew she was here. He looked at her badge. He looked at her face. Her eyes opened. They were dark brown. He noticed that the way you notice details when everything else goes quiet. Dark brown and completely alert, even through the pain, even through the blood loss. She looked at him, and he watched her work through it. The confusion, the recognition, the fear. And then he watched something else replace the fear. Not relief. Not surrender. Something harder than both of those things. "Don't," she said. Her voice was barely sound. "Don't let them—" "Don't talk," Damien said. I said don't talk." He stood up and looked back at Marcus. "Get the back seat ready. Call Reyes. Tell him we're coming, and he better have everything set up before we arrive." Marcus was out of the car already. "Boss, she's a cop." "I know what she is." "If someone finds out—" No one is going to find out. Damien looked back down at Eva Marlowe. Help me get her in the car. Marcus didn't argue. That was the thing about Marcus. He had been with Damien long enough to know that when the argument was already over, the only smart move was to get to work. They lifted her carefully, Damien taking her upper body and Marcus taking her legs. She made a sharp sound when they moved her, and her hand came up, grabbing Damien's jacket with more strength than she looked like she had left. Who are you? Her eyes focused on his face. You're... Yes, Damien said. I know. You're Damien Vale. We can talk about that later. I'm a cop. I'm aware. You should leave me here. He looked at her. Probably. He didn't leave her there. Pierre. Reyes met them at the East Side facility, a private medical space that officially did not exist, staffed by two people who had their own reasons to keep secrets. Dr. Lena Reyes was 53, precise, and completely unshockable, which was the most important quality a person could have when working for Damien Vale. She had her equipment ready when they came through the door. She didn't ask questions. She assessed, ordered Marcus out of the room, and went to work. Damien stood in the hallway outside and made exactly 2 calls. The first was to his contact at the Black Ridge PD, a man 3 levels up from street patrol who owed him a significant debt and who had spent the past 3 years quietly steering certain investigations in certain directions. The contact answered on the second ring. I need to know about Eva Marlowe, Damien said. Silence. Then, what about her? When was she last seen? Another pause, this one longer, the kind of pause that carried its own information. She missed her check-in at 10. She had a meeting with her partner before that. Ryan Cole reported she never showed up. Ryan Cole reported it. Yeah. Damien said nothing. Vale. What's going on? I'll be in touch. He ended the call. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, looking at nothing in particular, turning the information over in his mind. Eva Marlowe had a meeting with Ryan Cole. She never showed up to the check-in. Ryan Cole reported her missing, and Eva Marlowe ended up shot and bleeding in an empty district that nobody drove through unless they were lost or they were trying to make someone disappear. His second call was to his head of intelligence, a woman named Sorrel, who was very small, very quiet, and knew everything about everybody in Blackridge. I need a full file on Ryan Cole, he said. Detective Blackridge homicide. Everything you have. Financials Association's history. I need it in 2 hours. 2 hours is fast, Sorrel said. I know. He heard her typing already. It'll be ready. He put the phone in his pocket and went back to waiting. Todd. Lena came out an hour and 40 minutes later. She pulled her gloves off and looked at Damien with the expression she always wore when she was delivering complicated news, flat, affect eyes completely direct. She lost a significant amount of blood, Lena said. The bullet went through cleanly. No major organ damage, which is the only reason she's still alive. She's going to need rest fluids monitoring. She'll be weak for days. But she'll recover. If she doesn't develop infection, and if she stays still, yes. Lena paused. She kept asking who brought her in. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know. She didn't believe me. She never believes anything she's told, Damien said. It's one of her better qualities. Lena looked at him for a moment, the way she sometimes looked at him when she was deciding whether to say the thing she was actually thinking. Then she said it. She's a police detective, Damien. I know. Whatever your reasons, I know what she is, Lena. Lena held his gaze another moment. Then she stepped aside. She's awake. Barely. You have maybe 15 minutes before she goes under again. He walked past her into the room. Eva Marlowe looked worse in the light. The blood had been cleaned away, and she was pale underneath it, the gray white of someone who had lost more than the body liked to let go of. There was a line running into her arm. The monitors beside her beeped, soft and steady. Her dark hair was tangled against the pillow, but her eyes were open. and they found him the instant he stepped through the door. "There he is," she said. Her voice was raw, but the sharpness in it was completely intact. "Damien Vale, the most wanted man in Black Ridge City, in my room." "Technically, it's my room," Damien said. He pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone shot me." She watched him with those dark eyes. The assessment in them was constant. She was already cataloging, already building a picture. "You saved my life." "It appears that way." "Why?" He looked at her for a moment. "You were dying in the street. People die in the street every night in this city." "Not in front of me." She studied him. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not even close to trust, but a fractional adjustment, like a scale adding one small weight. "Ryan Cole," she said. The name landed in the room and changed the quality of the silence. "What about him?" Damien said. "He shot me." She said it straight and flat. No wobble in it. No horror. The voice of someone who had already processed the worst part and moved past it into the cold territory of fact. "He drove me out to the district. I thought we were meeting a witness. He shot me from behind, left me in the street, and called in my disappearance before the blood was dry on the asphalt." Damien said nothing. "I know what you're thinking," Eva said. "Do you? You're thinking I'm a cop telling you my partner shot me in a dark district and wondering how much of this you can trust. Among other things." She reached up slowly. It cost her something, that movement. He could see it in the tightening around her eyes and touched the inside of her jacket. Her fingers moved along a seam. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, small and crumpled, and held it toward him. He took it. It was a list. 16 names in handwritten print, tight and careful, the writing of someone who had been trained to document clearly. He recognized 4 of the names immediately. 3 more he recognized from context. The rest were unfamiliar, but the pattern around them was clear enough. Police officers, civilians, and 3 names that belonged to a network he had been trying to identify for the better part of 2 years. "Where did you get this?" Damien asked. "I built it," Eva said. 14 months of work. Every connection, every transaction I could verify, every name that kept appearing in the wrong places. And when I showed it to Ryan, he said he needed a night to look it over." She paused. "That was 3 days ago. And last night he took you out to the industrial district, under the pretense of a witness meeting." Her jaw set. The witness didn't exist. Damien looked at the list again, looked at the names he recognized, turned one name over in his mind, a name near the bottom, written in slightly heavier ink like Eva had pressed harder when she wrote it. "Calloway." He looked up. "Marcus Calloway is on your list." Eva watched him. "You know him. He's been moving money through businesses I'm associated with, laundering it through shell companies my organization uses as cover." Damien kept his voice even. "I've been trying to trace the source for 8 months." Eva stared at him. "Someone has been using your organization." "That's what it looks like. Without your knowledge. Without my knowledge or authorization." He folded the paper. "Which means someone inside my organization has been letting it happen." The silence stretched. Eva's voice when she spoke was careful. "So we have the same problem. Different sides of it. And the same enemy." Damien looked at her. She looked back at him. Between them, something neither of them had planned for, and neither of them particularly wanted, began to take shape in the space between her hospital bed and his chair. "I need resources," Eva said finally. "I can't go back to the department. I can't trust anyone inside it until I know who's on that list and who isn't." "And I need your investigation," Damien said. 14 months of documentation is more than my people have been able to build." "So what does that make us?" Damien stood from the chair. He looked at the woman who had spent 3 years trying to put him away, who had come closer than almost anyone who had been shot in the back by her own partner and crawled across broken asphalt rather than give up. "Right now," he said, "it makes us the only 2 people in this city who know exactly what we're dealing with." Eva looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she looked back at him. "I don't trust you," she said. "I don't trust you either." "But I don't have a choice." "Neither do I." He moved toward the door. "Get some sleep, detective. Tomorrow we start working." "Vale." He stopped. "The people on that list," Eva said. "They think I'm dead." Damien looked back at her over his shoulder. "Good," he said. "Let us use that." He read the Sorrel file on Ryan Cole at 2 in the morning, sitting at his desk with a glass of water he didn't drink and the kind of focus that only came when the information in front of him was bad enough to demand it. Ryan Cole, 41 years old, 13 years on the force. Performance record that looked clean until you knew what to look for, a series of investigations that went cold in specific ways at specific moments when specific names were about to surface. 2 commendations for bravery. 1. Internal Affairs review closed without findings 18 months ago. Financially, a salary that didn't explain the lake house or the vehicle or the travel records showing 3 trips to a city 2 states over where Callaway had been known to operate. The connections were there. They had just needed someone to see them. Eva Marlowe had seen them. Ryan Cole had tried to make sure she couldn't tell anyone. Damien set the file down and looked at the window. The city outside was dark and dense and humming with the low current of everything that happened in it after midnight. All the transactions, all the loyalties, all the violence that moved through it, like blood through a body. He had built something in that city. Something that required a particular kind of ruthlessness, a particular kind of clarity about what the world actually was and how it actually worked. He had not built it by being naive. He had not built it by trusting people who hadn't earned it. But there was a woman, 2 rooms down the hall, who had spent 14 months building a case that might destroy the network that had been feeding off his organization like a parasite, and who had been shot in the back for it by the person she trusted most, and who had looked up at him from a dark street with blood on her jacket and said, "Don't let them win." He picked up his phone. "Sorrel," he said when she answered. "I need everything on a network operating under the name Callaway. Full map money, people operations, anyone they've touched. And I need you to start cross-referencing with the names I'm about to send you." "Scale?" Sorrel asked. Damien thought about the list in his pocket. Thought about 16 names and 14 months of work, and a woman who shouldn't be alive. "Whatever scale it is," he said, "it's bigger than either of us thought." Cheer. Eva woke up the second time at 4 in the morning, and the first thing she did before she checked her wound, before she cataloged her surroundings, before she assessed the room for threat, was go through what she remembered. The meeting with Ryan, the drive out to the district, his voice perfectly normal, asking her questions about the case, listening to her answer, giving every indication he was exactly who she had believed him to be for 9 years. The moment she had turned to look at something in the passenger window, the sound, the white-hot shock of it, then the ground. Then Damien Vale's face in the dark, his fingers at her throat. She lay on her back and stared at the ceiling of a room she had never expected to be in, and ran the situation through her mind the way she had been trained to run evidence cold sequential, without allowing feeling to contaminate the process. She was alive. She was in a facility belonging to the most powerful criminal organization in Blackridge. The man who ran that organization had pulled her out of the street and called his private doctor instead of leaving her to bleed out. And the reason he had done that, the reason that made strategic sense, the reason that she could build a logical structure around, was that he needed what she had built. That was the part she could work with. That was the part that made sense. The other part, the part where he had looked at her in that dark street and the decision in his face had been immediate, not calculated. Not the expression of a man running numbers, but something else entirely. That part she set aside. She was a detective. She dealt in evidence. And the evidence right now said Damien Vale had saved her life for reasons she didn't fully understand, yet she was in his facility without her weapon and without backup and without anyone in the world who knew she was alive, and the partner she had trusted for 9 years had shot her in the back. Everything she thought she knew had to be rebuilt from the ground up. She heard movement outside the door. A knock, quiet, not demanding. "Come in," she said. It was a young woman she hadn't seen before, carrying a tray with water and something that smelled like actual food. She set it down without speaking and was almost back through the door when Eva said, "Wait." The woman stopped. "What's your name?" Eva asked. A pause. "Petra." "How long have you worked here, Petra?" Another pause, longer this time, the kind of pause that suggested the question was being evaluated rather than simply answered. "Long enough to know that Mr. Vale's instructions are to make sure you have whatever you need and to answer your questions when I'm able to." "And when you're not able to?" Petra looked at her directly. "Then I'll tell you I'm not able to instead of lying about it." Eva looked at her for a moment. "He hired you?" "Yes. Does he always hire people who tell the truth about what they can't tell you?" Something flickered in Petra's expression, almost amusement carefully contained. "He prefers it," she said. "He says liars cost more in the long run." She left. Eva picked up the water and drank half of it, and thought about a man who preferred people who told the truth in situations where lies would be easier, and tried to square that with everything she had documented about Damien Vale in 3 years of investigation. The two pictures didn't fit neatly together. That bothered her more than she wanted it to. By morning, Marcus had brought her a change of clothes, a phone that Damien had clearly had wiped and reconfigured. She could tell by the clean setup the absence of any previous data, and a folder that stopped her breathing when she opened it. Inside was a financial map, 15 pages of transactions, account traces, corporate shell structures, and payment records, all converging on the same points that her own investigation had been circling for months. Sorrell's work was meticulous and cross-referenced, and showed connections she had not been able to verify on her own because she hadn't had the access. At the top of the first page in handwriting, she was already recognizing as Damien's clean and spare and completely without flourish was a single line, "Your list and mine lead to the same place." Third page, bottom left. She turned to the third page. Bottom left. One name, circled once. A name she had seen before peripherally as a connection she couldn't quite solidify. Aldrich Bond, city councilman, developer, philanthropist. A man with a face on 3 billboards downtown and a charity foundation that had been praised in 2 newspaper editorials in the past year. And according to Damien's financial mapping, the central node through which every transaction in the Calloway network passed. Not Calloway himself. Calloway was just a name, an alias, a layer. The man behind it, the man who had built the system that turned the police department into an instrument and used the Mafia's infrastructure as a shadow business, was Aldrich Bond. Eva sat with that for a long moment. Then she picked up the clean phone and typed a message to the number that was already saved under the contact name V. "We need to talk. Today." 3 minutes passed, then conference room. 30 minutes. "Can you walk?" She thought about the wound in her side, the weakness in her legs, the way standing up earlier had grayed the edges of her vision. She typed back, "Yes." She was not entirely certain that was true. But Detective Eva Marlowe had not come this far to sit in bed. Dull. The conference room was spare and clean with a long table and several chairs and a window that looked out on nothing revealing. Damien was already there when she came in, leaning against the table, rather than sitting the Sorrel file open in front of him, and 2 cups of coffee on the table that smelled strong enough to qualify as a controlled substance. He looked at her when she came through the door and tracked her movement the way someone tracks a thing they are assessing for structural integrity, not intrusive, not clinical, just accurate. "You should still be in bed," he said. "Probably," Eva said. She pulled out a chair and sat down before her legs could express an opinion about that. "Aldrich Bond." Damien picked up his coffee. "Aldrich Bond. You've been investigating him." "I've been investigating the money that's been moving through my organization without my authorization. It took 8 months to trace it to him." He paused. "Your file got me there in 30 minutes. 14 months of work." "I know." He said it in a way that acknowledged what 14 months of work meant, not as compliment, just as recognition of cost. He's been brilliant about it, using my infrastructure as a firewall. If the operation had ever been investigated, it would have pointed at me. And you'd be the one arrested. While he walked away clean. Damien set the coffee down. He's been doing this for years. Not just with my organization. He finds existing criminal infrastructure, embeds his operation inside it, and then uses it as both a revenue stream and a shield. Eva looked at the financial map. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate, 40 million over 5 years, probably more. And the police connection. He bought people. Ryan Cole was one of several. Some of them probably didn't understand the full scope of what they were involved in initially. By the time they understood, they were too deep to get out. Eva was quiet for a moment. Ryan understood. Yes. Damien said it without softening it. Ryan Cole understood. She nodded once. The movement was controlled and precise, and told him nothing about what it cost her, which he suspected was more than she was going to let show. The evidence, she said. Your financial mapping, my documentation. If we can add transaction records, original records, not copies that can be challenged. There's a vault, Damien said. She looked at him. Bond keeps original records, Damien said. Physical copies, encrypted drives, everything. He's too careful to trust it all to a server that can be hacked or a cloud that can be subpoenaed. Sorrell tracked the location 8 weeks ago. I hadn't moved on it because I didn't have enough of the overall picture to know what I was looking at when I got inside. But now I have your 14 months. He looked at her steadily. And you have my 8. Eva looked at the map, looked at the circled name, looked at the man across the table who was not what she had expected, and not what she had built her case around, and not what anything in her professional history had prepared her for. You understand what we're doing, she said. If this works, if this evidence comes out the way it should, it ends your operation too. The shell companies, the infrastructure, all of it gets exposed. I know. You'd be handing investigators everything they'd need. I know that too. And you're willing to do that. Damien picked up his coffee again. He looked at the window for a moment, a long moment, the kind that meant he was looking at something internal rather than external. Then he looked back at her. Eva, he said. He used her first name without thinking about it, and she didn't correct him. The people on that list have been using my name as a weapon against people who had nothing to do with me. They've been hiding behind my reputation and my infrastructure to do things I would not have sanctioned. He set the coffee down. Nobody uses my name, not without consequences. It was the most he had said at once since she had met him. She looked at him for another long moment. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, we do this. She put her hand flat on the financial map. But we do it right. Full documentation chain of evidence, no shortcuts that give anyone a way to challenge it in court. Agreed. And when it's done, you take what you need and you do your job, Damien said. Whatever that looks like on the other side. She understood what he was saying, not offering himself up, not making any claims about what came after. Just do what you're supposed to do. Do the job. One more thing, Eva said. What? Ryan Cole. Her voice didn't change. It stayed level and clear and completely without the kind of emotional texture that would have told him what it cost her to say it. He needs to be on the right side of a cell door when this is over. Damien looked at her for a moment. He will be, he said. And for the first time since she had opened her eyes in a dark street to find a Mafia boss kneeling beside her, Detective Eva Marlowe believed something she was told without running it through every filter she owned first. She didn't examine that too closely. There was too much work to do. The next 3 days had a rhythm that neither of them acknowledged out loud. Damien's people and Eva's investigation worked in parallel, Sorrell cross-referencing Marcus running logistics. Lena checking Eva's wound twice daily, with the expression of someone who had strong opinions about patients who refused adequate rest. Eva sat at the long table and mapped connections and filled gaps in Damien's financial data with her own documentation until the picture that emerged was so complete and so damning that the first time she laid the full version out in front of Damien, he stood there looking at it without speaking for almost a full minute. "How many people knew you were building this?" he asked finally. "Just Ryan," Eva said. Damien looked at her. "I know," she said before he could say it. She did know. She had known since she woke up on the ground in the industrial district, known it in the way you know a thing that you had already understood before the confirmation arrived, a knowledge that had been building in the background for months. In small moments, she had explained away or ignored or filed under. "I'll look at that later." Later had arrived. "He fed you to them the moment you showed him the list," Damien said. "The moment he realized I could prove it," Eva said. "He could probably have managed the situation if I'd had theories. But documented evidence with named sources and transaction records." She stopped. "He couldn't let that see a courtroom. So instead of finding a way to bury the evidence, he decided to bury the investigator." "It's cleaner," Eva said in the flat voice of someone describing operational logic rather than personal betrayal. "Fewer loose ends." Damien watched her. He had watched her more than she knew over the past 3 days, not because he distrusted her, but because there was something in the way she worked that he found himself unable to stop observing. The precision of it. The way she separated emotion from analysis, not by shutting emotion off, but by giving it its own lane and making sure it didn't cross into the lane where the thinking happened. He recognized that skill. He had spent 20 years developing the same one. "Eva," he said. She looked up from the table. 9 years is a long time," he said. Her expression didn't change, but something underneath it shifted, a very small shift. A very controlled one. "Don't," she said. "I'm not doing anything." "The look you're giving me is doing something." She looked back at the table. "I'll fall apart when this is over. Right now I need to think." He said nothing else. She went back to the map. He went back to watching her work and understood in the quiet and particular way that certain understandings arrive, that the woman across the table was the most genuinely stubborn person he had ever met, and that this quality, which had nearly gotten her killed, was also the only reason she was still alive. Gyud. On the 4th night, Sorrel called with information that changed everything. "They know she's alive." Damien was on his feet before Sorrel finished the sentence. "How?" "Lena's external supplier. One of the supply orders that went through a channel that was supposed to be clean." A pause. "It wasn't clean. Someone flagged the order and cross-referenced it." "Ryan Cole." "Someone above Ryan Cole." Another pause. "The order came down through Bond's network. They're moving tonight." Damien was already walking. "Moving on what?" "On you. They're not going to come for her first. They're going to come for the facility. If they neutralize your resources, she's isolated." He made 3 calls in 60 seconds. By the second call, his people were already repositioning. By the third, he was outside Eva's room knocking. She opened the door before he could knock twice. She was already dressed. She had been awake, he realized, probably for hours. "I heard," she said. "You heard?" "The walls are thin and you talk loudly when you're moving fast." She already had the folder with the map under her arm. "The vault. We need to get to it before they regroup and lock it down." "That's a significantly accelerated timeline from what we discussed." "The timeline just got accelerated for us." She met his eyes. "Are your people ready?" Damien looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had been shot 4 days ago and should have been in bed and instead was standing in a doorway, ready to run a field operation against the most dangerous network in Black Ridge City. "My people are always ready," he said. Eva allowed herself one breath. Just one. "Then let's go end this." She stepped past him into the hallway, and Damien Vale, who had spent 20 years operating on the principle, that no one was worth the risk of exposure, that every decision came down to calculation, and never to something as unreliable as faith fell into step beside her. Not behind her, not in front of her, beside her. And somewhere in the part of himself he had sealed off a long time ago, he registered what that meant and chose not to examine it until there was time. Right now there was only the work, and the city outside dark and dense and finally about to answer for itself. The car moved fast through streets that had gone quiet in the way streets go quiet at 3 in the morning. Not peaceful, just emptied out everything. Human pulled back behind closed doors while the city breathed through its teeth and waited. Eva sat in the back seat with the folder pressed flat against her thighs and her eyes forward. Damien was beside her. Marcus drove. Nobody spoke for the first 4 minutes because there was nothing to say that hadn't already been said, and everything that mattered now was movement and timing and the next 60 seconds after that. Her side hurt. Not the sharp, clarifying pain of the first day. This was the deeper, duller pain of tissue fighting to rebuild itself, a pain that lived underneath everything and came forward when she moved wrong, or breathed too deep, or forgot for a moment to hold herself carefully. She didn't mention it. She had stopped mentioning it 2 days ago because mentioning it accomplished nothing except giving people a reason to tell her to sit down. She was done sitting down. The vault is in the basement level of the Aldrich Bond Financial Trust building on Mercer, Damien said quietly. Sorrel has the access schematics. There are 2 security personnel on overnight rotation. Both of them are on Bond's direct payroll, not contracted, which means they know what's down there. How many entry points? 3 that are standard, 1 that isn't. He paused. My people used that building for a meeting 2 years ago before I understood what Bond was. I had the layout pulled then. It hasn't been updated since. You're trusting 2-year-old schematics. I'm trusting Sorrel's confirmation that the layout hasn't changed. He glanced at her. She checked this morning. Eva accepted that and moved forward. Ryan Cole knows we're coming. Ryan Cole knows you're alive and that the facility was compromised. He doesn't know we moved or where we're going. He'll figure out the vault. He'll figure out the vault eventually, Damien said. We need to be inside and out before eventually becomes now. Marcus took a left without being told, and Eva recalibrated the route in her head. 2 more minutes to Mercer, maybe 3. She looked at her hands in her lap, steady both of them, which was the only performance review she needed right now. 9 years. She had known Ryan Cole for 9 years. She filed the thought back where it belonged and locked the drawer. When we get inside, she said, I lead the evidence collection. Whatever we pull, I document. Chain of custody has to be clean or none of this survives a courtroom. Agreed. That means your people follow my protocol. Damien looked at her sideways. There was something in the look that wasn't quite amusement and wasn't quite irritation. Something between the two, a quality of attention that she had noticed he gave to things that surprised him. My people will follow your protocol, he said. I need that to actually mean something. It means something, he said, and his voice had the quality of a statement rather than a reassurance, factual, grounded, not performing conviction, but simply expressing it. She looked back at the road. Vale? What? If this goes wrong tonight, it's not going to go wrong. But if it does... She kept her eyes forward. The list. The documentation I built. Copies are in 3 locations I haven't told you about. If something happens to me, my contact at the federal level gets an anonymous delivery within 48 hours. Silence for a moment. You set that up before you came with me tonight, Damien said. I set that up before I woke up the second time, Eva said. The moment I could hold a pen. Another silence. Then very quietly, good. She didn't look at him. But something settled in her chest that had been braced and tense since the moment she'd opened her eyes in a dark street 4 days ago. They pulled onto Mercer. The building ahead of them was dark and clean-faced and entirely ordinary-looking, which was, she understood now, the whole point of Aldrich Bond. Everything ordinary-looking, everything hiding something underneath. Marcus cut the headlights 2 blocks out. It was time. Getting in took 11 minutes. The non-standard entry point was a loading access on the north side, a door that existed on older versions of the building's registered schematics and had been quietly removed from the current filings. Damien's 2-year-old knowledge, plus Sorel's verification, meant they knew exactly where it was and exactly what it took to open it, and the man Damien had brought for the purpose, a quiet, compact individual named Trent, who had not introduced himself and did not appear to feel the need had it open in 40 seconds. They moved through the building in a formation that Eva recognized from tactical training, even though nobody here was wearing a badge. Trent first, then Damien, then Eva, then a second man named Colum, who brought up the rear and moved like someone who had been doing exactly this kind of thing for a long time. The overnight security personnel were handled without violence. Damien's phrasing, and she had not asked what it meant in practice, because she had enough to think about, and because the 2 guards she passed, seated and secured, appeared uninjured. The basement level had a different quality to it. Cooler, quieter. The sound absorption of a space designed to be unobtrusive. It was lit by recessed fixtures that came on automatically when they entered motion triggered, and the first thing Eva noticed was that it was larger than the schematics had suggested. The second thing she noticed was the vault. It was not dramatic. It did not look like the kind of vault that appeared in movies, no enormous steel wheel, no obvious imposing presence. It was a reinforced room with a biometric access panel and a door that sat flush with the wall and would have been easy to miss if you didn't know it was there. Damien stopped in front of it and looked at the panel. "Sorel said we'd need a secondary bypass," Eva said. "She sent it." He pulled out his phone and read something off the screen to Trent, who produced a small device and connected it to the panel's secondary port, with the practiced ease of someone who had done this kind of thing enough times that it had stopped feeling remarkable. 30 seconds. The door clicked. Eva breathed. They went in. What was inside was not $40 million in cash, and it was not weapons, and it was not drugs. It was paper. Files, binders, hard drives, labeled and organized with the meticulous care of a man who was either very arrogant or very confident that this room would never be found, or possibly both, since arrogance and confidence had a way of feeding each other until they became indistinguishable. Eva stood in the center of it and turned slowly and understood in the way she understood things that had been building for a long time before they fully arrived, that she was looking at everything. Not just the Black Ridge operation. Everything. Dates and locations, and names and transaction records going back 11 years, spanning 4 cities, involving not just police officers and criminals, but judges and developers, and city officials and federal contractors. The Black Ridge network was not the whole picture. It was one piece of a much larger architecture that Aldrich Bond had spent over a decade constructing. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Damien." He was already beside her looking at the same files. "I know," he said. "This is bigger than... I know. This isn't just Black Ridge." "I know, Eva." His voice was quiet and completely level. "Start documenting. We have limited time." She started documenting. She moved through the room with the systematic efficiency of 14 months of training, photographing, cataloging, logging each item in the sequence required to make it defensible in court. Damien's people assisted without needing to be directed, which told her he had briefed them, which told her he had thought this through far more carefully than the last few days' urgency had made apparent. 17 minutes into the process, her phone, the clean phone Damien had given her, buzzed once. She looked at it. "Sorrel Cole is moving. 3 vehicles. Heading toward Mercer. ETA 14 minutes. She looked up. Damien was already reading the same message on his own phone. 14 minutes, she said. "We need the drives," he said. "The paper we can document and photograph. The drives are the originals, that's what survives a defense challenge." She was already moving toward the row of labeled drives on the far shelf. "How many?" Trent was counting. 11. "Take all of them." She looked at Damien. We take all of them, and we go. That's theft of evidence before it's legally documented. That's preservation of evidence before it's destroyed. She met his eyes. Ryan Cole's people won't be coming here to secure this room. They'll be coming here to empty it. He held her gaze for 1 second. 2. Call 'em, he said. The drives. Column moved. They were out of the vault with 12 minutes left on Sorrell's estimate, 8 drives and 3 critical binders, and a photographic record of everything they hadn't been able to carry, and they moved back through the building, the way they had come in, fast, clean, no unnecessary sound. They were in the car with 7 minutes to spare, when 3 sets of headlights turned onto Mercer from the south end. Marcus didn't need to be told. He pulled out north. Eva watched the headlights in the side mirror until they disappeared behind a corner, and she sat back against the seat and let herself have exactly 3 seconds of something that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite triumph, but lived somewhere between the two. 3 seconds. Then she opened the first binder on her lap and went back to work. Tim. Damien watched her. He had been watching her in one way or another for 4 days now, and the picture that had assembled itself over that time was not the picture he had held of Eva Marlowe for the 3 years she had been circling his organization. That picture had been professional, a threat to be managed, an investigator to be monitored, a name that came up in his lawyer's calls with consistent frequency, because she was careful and she was persistent, and she was better at her job than most of the people doing it. The picture he had now was something he didn't have clean language for. She was reading the binder in the moving car in the dark, with a small flashlight she had apparently produced from somewhere, taking notes on a pad she had gotten from Lena at some point, without his noticing. And her face held the expression it always held when she was working, intense and inward, and completely focused, not blank, but the opposite of blank, alive with the processing of information in a way that was almost visible. She had been shot 4 days ago. She had lost enough blood that Lena had told him afterward that another 20 minutes on that street would have been fatal. And she was reading evidence files in the back of a moving car at 3:40 in the morning and making notes. He thought about the woman his contact had described when he first became aware of Eva Marlowe, a cop who worked cold cases on her own time, who filed reports with a level of detail that made other detectives' documentation look like first drafts, who had been passed over for advancement twice because her clearance numbers were high, but her supervisors found her difficult. Difficult. He had wondered when he first read that what difficult meant in practice. Now he knew. Difficult meant she did not stop. Not for protocol, not for hierarchy, not for the judgment of people who found her inconvenient, not for a bullet. There's a name in here, Eva said without looking up from the binder. Which name? Marcus Calloway. Your name for him. His real name is Jerome Pettit. He's been operating under Calloway as an alias for 9 years. She turned a page. He's not a contractor for Bond. He's a partner. Equal stake. They built this together. Damien processed that. That changes the exposure map. It changes everything. She looked up at him. If Pettit goes down, he has every incentive to negotiate. He knows where every piece is buried. He could deliver Bond completely. She held his gaze. But it also means Bond has a partner who can warn him. If Pettit gets wind that this room has been accessed, Bond disappears. Tonight, Eva said. We have tonight. Maybe tomorrow morning. After that the window closes. Damien was already thinking 3 moves forward. We need to make a decision about how this gets used. There's only one way this gets used correctly, Eva said. Her voice was certain, and the certainty in it was not the kind that came from stubbornness, but from having thought it through so thoroughly that doubt simply didn't have a foothold. Federal level, not Black Ridge PD. We can't trust the department until we know every name on that list. Not the mayor's office. Federal. You have a contact. I have someone I trust. Someone who's been outside Black Ridge for the past 3 years and has no connection to Bond's network. She closed the binder. I need to make a call. Damien looked at her steadily. Using information you got from my organization. Using information we got together, Eva said. She didn't flinch from his gaze. I know what that means for you. I know what it costs. I'm not pretending otherwise. A long moment. The car moved through the dark streets. Make your call, Damien said. Special Agent Diane Marsh had worked federal organized crime for 16 years, and she answered her phone on the third ring, regardless of the hour, because that was the kind of person she was, the kind who understood that the hour rarely factored into whether something was important. Marlowe. Her voice was carefully neutral, in the way the voices of people who had been in this business long enough got carefully neutral, not cold, just stripped of unnecessary reaction. You've been reported missing. I've been watching that for 4 days. I wasn't missing, Eva said. I was recovering. From Ryan Cole shot me. Silence. The specific silence of someone very controlled receiving information that tests that control. Then, tell me. Eva told her, not everything. Not Damien's involvement. Not the specifics of the facility. Not the elements that would trigger a parallel investigation before the primary one could be established. She told Marsh about the list, about the 14 months of documentation, about Aldrich Bond and Jerome Petit and the vault on Mercer, and what they had pulled out of it tonight. She told Marsh enough. Marsh was quiet for a long time after Eva stopped talking. You have the drives, Marsh said finally. I have them. In your possession, right now. Right now. Eva. The careful neutrality had shifted slightly, not breaking, just bending towards something more direct. I need to know who helped you access that vault. A pause. Eva looked at Damien in the dark of the car. He was watching her. His expression was entirely still. I had assistance from a source who is not the subject of federal investigation, Eva said. The source's involvement was instrumental to the preservation of evidence that would otherwise have been destroyed tonight. I'll make a full statement about the circumstances of evidence collection. Everything was documented in sequence. Another silence from Marsh. That's a very careful way of not answering my question, Marsh said. It's the answer I have right now, Eva said. One more silence. Then, where are you? Moving. Give me 6 hours and a location, and I'll be there with everything. 6 hours. 6 hours. Marlowe. Marsh's voice dropped half a register. Are you safe? Eva looked at Damien. He was still watching her. In the low light of the car, his face was unreadable, in the way faces get when the person behind them has decided something and is waiting for the moment to act on it. Yes, Eva said. I'm safe. She ended the call. The car was quiet. You didn't tell her, Damien said. I told her what was relevant to the investigation. I'm relevant to the investigation. You're relevant to a different part of the conversation, Eva said. A part that happens after the primary case is secured. She looked at him directly. I'm not protecting you. I'm sequencing correctly. Those can both be true. She held his gaze. Yes, she said. They can. Marcus made a turn. The city outside shifted around them, the character of the streets changing as they moved further from the commercial district into something older and quieter. 6 hours, Damien said. 6 hours, Eva confirmed. Neither of them said what 6 hours meant for his side of the equation. They both knew. 6 hours before federal involvement became official was not much time for a man who ran an organization that would need to be managed, contained, prepared for what was coming. It was not much time at all. But he didn't ask for more. Marcus, he said, take us back to the east side. Troy. The east side facility was quiet when they arrived, but it was a different kind of quiet than they'd left it, a braced. Quiet, the silence of a place where people were alert and waiting, rather than simply resting. Damien's people had clearly been active while they were gone. Petra met them at the door with the expression of someone who had not slept and had spent the intervening time doing things that needed to be done. Sorrell's been calling, Petra said to Damien. She says it's urgent. It's always urgent. He looked at Eva. Go inside. Lena will want to check you. Lena can check me in 20 minutes. I need to secure the drives first. He almost said something. She could see him almost say it. Then he didn't, which she was beginning to understand was one of his more significant qualities, the ability to recognize when an argument was a waste of time and redirect the energy towards something productive. "Trent," he said, "stay with Detective Marlowe." Trent, who had still not introduced himself and apparently didn't plan to, moved to Eva's side without comment. Damien went to find Sorrel. What Sorrel had to tell him took 4 minutes and rearranged everything. She was waiting for him in the small back office, her laptop open, 2 phones on the table beside it, and the expression she wore when the information was serious enough to require she deliver it in person rather than by text. "Jerome Petit," she said before he sat down. Damien went still. "He's dead," Sorrel said. "An hour ago. His body was found in a parking structure in the Harrow district, single gunshot." She paused. "It wasn't Cole's people." "Then whose?" "Bon." She turned her laptop toward him. A security feed timestamp 47 minutes ago, a parking structure Damien recognized by layout. "This is the camera at the south exit. Watch the vehicle at the 4-minute mark." He watched. A black car. City-registered plates, he recognized the format. It stopped at the exit, held for exactly 8 seconds, then pulled out. Those plates belonged to a city vehicle. A vehicle registered to the office of the Black Ridge City Council. Damien sat down. "Bon had his own partner killed," Damien said. "Petit was the only person who could have negotiated a deal that implicated Bon directly," Sorrel said. "With Petit gone, Bon thinks he's clean enough to survive whatever comes next." Damien looked at the frozen image on the screen. "He doesn't know about the vault." "He knows the vault was accessed. Ryan Cole reported it 20 minutes after his people arrived on Mercer." She paused. "But he doesn't know what we took. Cole's team reported the vault appeared intact." "They didn't go inside. They weren't authorized to." Sorrel's voice was even. "Cole told them to assess and report. Bon thinks we broke in, got spooked when Cole's vehicles appeared and ran without taking anything." Damien processed this. "He thinks we failed," Damien said. "He thinks you tried and failed," Sorrel confirmed. "He's moving tonight. We believe he's planning to relocate the vault's contents before morning." "But the contents are already gone. The contents are in this building." Sorrel closed the laptop. "Damien, if Bond sends people to empty that vault and finds it already empty, he will know immediately that he underestimated what happened on Mercer. And he will understand the timeline. He'll run. He'll run tonight, before federal involvement can be established." Damien sat with that for exactly the time it took to fully understand what it meant, and then he stood up. "Where is he right now?" he said. "His residence, the Alder Park address." "Alone, 4 security personnel, 2 vehicles in the garage." A pause. "And Ryan Cole arrived there 30 minutes ago." Of course he did. Of course Ryan Cole, having failed to confirm Eva's death and having found the vault breached, had gone directly to Bon. Not to report. Not simply to report. To reposition. To make sure that whatever happened next, Cole was standing close enough to the center to survive it. Damien thought about a parking structure in Harrow District. He thought about what happened to the last person who had been close to the center when Bon decided to clean house. "Sorrel," he said, "is Cole aware of what happened to Petit?" Her expression shifted. Not much, but he could read her expressions. "I don't believe so. Not yet." Damien thought about this. There was a version of what came next in which Ryan Cole, the man who had shot Eva Marlowe in the back and left her to die on a dark street, walked into a situation he did not understand. And there was a certain elegant justice in that, a certain cleanness to the outcome. And Damien Vale had spent 20 years making decisions based on elegant outcomes and clean operational logic. He walked back to where Eva was working. "Adieu," She had the drives laid out on the table and was going through them with Trent standing watch and a systematic focus that didn't break when Damien came through the door. She looked up, read his face, and was on her feet before he said a word. "What happened?" she said. "Pettit is dead. Bond had him killed an hour ago." She absorbed this in the way she absorbed hard information, fast, clean, no performance of reaction. "Cole is at Bond's residence." "How did you—" "Because that's what Cole would do," she said. "He's repositioning. He doesn't know yet that Bond is cleaning house." She looked at Damien. "Cole doesn't know he's next." "Probably not." "So we have a window." "What kind of window?" Eva looked at the drives on the table, looked at Damien. "Bond thinks the vault was untouched. He's going to send people to empty it tonight. When they get there and find it already stripped, he knows within the hour that he's exposed, and Cole is sitting in his house when that happens." She let that sit for a moment. "A man like Bond, when he's cornered, he doesn't negotiate and he doesn't run with loose ends. Cole becomes a loose end the moment Bond understands the vault is empty." "Exactly." She held Damien's gaze. "I need Cole alive. I need him in a courtroom. Whatever his crimes, whatever he did, I need him standing in front of a jury, not turning up in a parking structure in the Harrow district." Damien looked at her for a long moment. There were things he could have said. About Ryan Cole and what Ryan Cole deserved. About the kind of justice that existed outside courtrooms, in a city where courtrooms themselves had been compromised. About the fact that Cole's death at Bond's hands would, in a cold and operational sense, be a simpler outcome. He didn't say any of them. "We need to get Cole out of that house," he said instead. Eva's expression shifted. Not relief, not gratitude. Just a fractional adjustment. The recalibration of someone who had expected resistance and was now recalculating without it. "I can call him," she said. The silence that followed that was the loudest silence Damien had heard in the past 4 days. "You want to call the man who shot you?" he said. "I want to use the fact that he thinks I'm dead." She was already thinking through it. He could see the mechanism of it moving behind her eyes. "If I call him, if he hears my voice, he'll be destabilized. He'll be terrified," she said. "And a terrified man makes mistakes. He might run, he might panic and say something on a recorded line." She paused. "Or he might come to me." "And walk into what?" "Walk into a conversation with a federal agent," Eva said. "If I can get Cole to leave Bond's residence before Bond's people go to the vault and understand what happened, Cole might survive the night. And if he survives the night, there's a chance he talks." Damien was quiet. "He shot you," Damien said again. "Not accusation. Something else. I know what he did." Her voice was level. "I also know what he can give us in a courtroom." She looked at the drives. Bond on his own is one case. Bond with Cole's testimony is every case. It's every city. It's 11 years of operations across 4 states. Damien understood she was right. He understood it, and he didn't like it, which was its own kind of information, the kind that arrived without an invitation and told you things about yourself you hadn't asked to know. "Make the call," he said. She picked up the clean phone. Her hand on the phone was steady. He watched her dial the number, Ryan Cole's number, a number she had called 1,000 times in 9 years, and he watched her face settle into something that was not emotion, and was not the absence of emotion, but was the deliberate management of both the expression of a person holding a very heavy thing very carefully. It rang twice. "Ava!" Ryan Cole's voice came through the speaker. She had put it on speaker without being asked, without him having to request it, just done it so he could hear. The voice was shocked and low and trying to be quiet, like a man who had stepped into another room to take a call he couldn't let anyone hear. "Eva, how?" "Hello, Ryan?" she said. A sound on his end that wasn't quite breathing and wasn't quite a word. "I'm going to make this very simple," Eva said. Her voice was completely controlled. "I'm alive. I have everything. And right now the man you're sitting with is about to understand that the vault on Mercer is empty." She paused. "You have about 30 minutes before you stop being useful to him. Silence. You know what happens to people who stop being useful to him, Eva said. You were in the parking structure at Harrow District 40 minutes ago. You saw what they brought out. A sharp intake of breath. He hadn't known about Petite. He knew now. Eva? His voice had changed. The shock had curdled into something raw. Eva, don't, she said. Her voice stayed level, stayed clean. Don't explain it to me. Not right now. Right now I need you to get out of that house, and I need you to call the number I'm about to text you. She paused. If you do that, if you walk out right now and you make that call, there's a conversation to be had. There's a process. There's a courtroom instead of a parking structure. A long silence. Damien watched her face. It gave him nothing. Why would you? Cole's voice cracked on the second word. He stopped, restarted. Why would you give me that? Because I'm a detective, Eva said. Not a judge. Not an executioner. A detective. She paused one last time. Walk out, Ryan. Walk out right now. She ended the call. The room was absolutely quiet. Trent didn't move. Damien didn't move. Eva set the phone down on the table. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she picked up the pad she had been writing on and looked at her notes and said in the same completely controlled voice, We need to get the drive secured at a secondary location before morning. If Cole runs instead of calling Marsh, Bond's people will be looking for everything we took within the hour. We can't have it all in one place. Damien looked at her. Ava, he said. I'm fine, she said without looking up. I didn't ask. I know. She looked up at him. Her eyes were completely clear. I know you didn't. They looked at each other for a moment that lasted slightly longer than the preceding moments had lasted. Then she looked back at her notes. Secondary location, she said again. I know a place, Damien said. And he did, and they went. The text came 41 minutes later, when they were 2 blocks from the secondary location, and the first gray suggestion of early morning was beginning to separate itself from the black at the eastern edge of the sky. It came to Eva's phone from Ryan Cole's number. 4 words. I'm out. I'm calling. She read it once. She held the phone still for a moment. Then she forwarded it to Marsh's number without comment, and put the phone in her pocket and watched the street ahead of them through the windshield. Damien said nothing. Marcus said nothing. The city moved around them in its early morning way. The first delivery trucks, the last night shift workers, the particular thin light that belonged to the hour between dark and dawn when everything was in transition and nothing had been decided yet. He'll testify, Eva said. You think so? He's terrified. She looked at her hands. And he's not stupid. He understands what Petit's death means. He understands that walking into federal protection is the only version of tonight where he's still alive in a week. And you're comfortable with that. She thought about the question for a moment, actually thought about it, gave it the weight it deserved, rather than answering reflexively. No, she said. I'm not comfortable with it. He shot me and left me in the street. She paused. But comfortable isn't the standard. Justice is the standard, and justice means a courtroom. It means Bond in front of a jury with Cole on the stand. It means 11 years of crimes documented and prosecuted and answered for. She looked at Damien. That matters more than what I'm comfortable with. Damien was quiet. Then, most people wouldn't do that. Most people aren't detectives. Most detectives wouldn't do that either. She looked at him. What would you do? He considered it. I spent 20 years in a world where the answer to that question was simple, he said. Someone betrays you, you eliminate the problem. Clean, permanent, no loose ends. He paused. You're asking me if I think you're right to handle it the way you're handling it. I'm asking what you would do. What I would have done, he said carefully, and what I think is right are not the same answer right now. He looked at her directly. What you're doing is right. I'm not sure it's something I would have done on my own. She held his gaze. Maybe that's why you need both of us, she said. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't flirtation. It was a straight observation, precise and honest, the voice of a woman who dealt in exactly what was in front of her and didn't dress it in anything else. He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe," he said. Marcus pulled to a stop. They were there. The drives were going into a secured location known to 3 people on Earth, and exactly 0 people connected to Bond's network, and the evidence that Aldrich Bond had spent 11 years constructing in the belief that it would never be found was now in federal hands by proxy. And Ryan Cole was somewhere in the city making a phone call that would determine what remained of his life, and the window, the narrow specific window that Sorrel had identified and Eva had driven them through by sheer force of will, was still open, for now. Damien stepped out of the car and looked up at the sky where the black was thinning at its edges. 6 hours, he thought. Less now. He looked back at Eva, who was already out of the car and moving toward the door, the folder under her arm, and that same absolute forward momentum that had been driving her since the moment she opened her eyes in his car 4 nights ago when everything had already been decided and only the execution remained. He had made one choice in a dark street. Everything since then had been the consequence of that choice. He was beginning to understand that the consequences were not finished arriving. Not by a long way. The secondary location held. By 5:47 in the morning, the drives were locked in a fireproof case behind a wall that the building's current registration did not mention and that only Damien Sorrel and Marcus knew existed. Eva had photographed the storage location, logged the case number, and sent the documentation to Marsh's secure line with a timestamp and a brief text that said, "Secured. Will deliver in person at the meet. Do not move on Bond until I call you." Marsh had replied with 2 words, "Understood. Hurry." That was the thing about Diane Marsh that Eva had trusted for 16 years. She understood the difference between control and interference, and she didn't blur that line, even when it would have been easy to. Eva sat on the edge of a workbench in the back room of the secondary location, with her jacket off and Lena's number pulled up on her phone, because the wound in her side was telling her things she had been ignoring for the past 4 hours, and it was starting to speak louder than she could manage. She didn't call Lena. She pressed 2 fingers against the bandaging through her shirt, felt the warmth she didn't want to feel, and pulled her fingers away and looked at them. Not soaked through. Seeping, though. She put her jacket back on. Damien came through the door from the front room. He looked at her. His eyes went immediately to her side, obviously not in a way that announced itself, but she caught it because she was a detective and she caught things. "Lena needs to look at that," he said. "Lena is 20 minutes away. So we go back. We go back when Marsh confirms she has eyes on Bond's location." Eva looked at her phone. The moment Bond's people hit that vault on Mercer and find it empty, he disappears. Marsh needs to have him contained before that happens. You can bleed and make strategic decisions at the same time. I'm aware of that. I've been doing it for 4 hours. Damien looked at her for a long moment. The expression on his face was not concern in any soft or sentimental sense. It was the expression of a man running a calculation and not liking the variables. If you pass out before this is finished, it doesn't help anyone. I'm not going to pass out. How confident are you in that? She met his eyes, confident enough to still be standing. He didn't push it. He sat down across from her on a wooden crate that served no decorative purpose and looked at his phone. Sorrel is monitoring Bond's location. His vehicles haven't moved. Cole. Marsh's people picked him up 40 minutes ago. He's in federal custody. He paused. He went voluntarily. Eva absorbed that. Voluntarily was not a small word in this context. Voluntarily meant Cole had understood what the alternative looked like, had understood it clearly enough to walk into a situation he had spent 9 years avoiding, and had chosen the courtroom over the parking structure. Whether that made him brave or just desperate was a question for another time. "He'll cooperate," she said. "You keep saying that." "Because I know him." She stopped, caught the way that landed, amended it before it could settle wrong. "I knew a version of him. The version that existed before the version that shot me." She looked at the floor. The first version would cooperate. It was always the part of him I trusted, the part that believed in the process, even when the process was difficult. She paused. Clearly, at some point, he stopped believing in it. Or someone gave him a reason to stop. She looked up. Damien's expression was even, not pushing, just offering the tone of a man who had spent 2 decades watching people make the choices that compromised them, who understood the architecture of corruption from the inside out. Money, Eva said. Money, fear. A problem that needed solving and someone who offered a solution that seemed contained. And then another problem, and then another. He looked at her steadily. It almost never starts as a decision to become a criminal. It starts as a decision to survive one bad moment. You sound like you know. I know everyone who's ever worked for me, he said. I know how they got there. She was quiet for a moment. Is that how you got there? She said. It was the most direct thing she had asked him since she had woken up in his facility. She watched him receive it. No flinch, no deflection. Just that characteristic stillness that she was beginning to understand was not coldness, but a kind of density, a weight to the way he occupied a moment. No, he said. I got there differently. He didn't expand on it. She didn't push. Her phone buzzed. Marsh moving assets into position around Bond's residence now. ETA on your end, Eva typed back. 1 hour. Keep it quiet until I arrive. Marsh, you're coming to the scene. Eva, I'm the primary investigator on this case. Yes. A pause. Then fine. 1 hour. She put the phone down and looked at Damien. 1 hour, she said. He stood up. Then we go back to the East Side facility first. Lena checks you. If she says you're stable enough to be on scene, you're on scene. If she says you're not, she'll say I'm stable enough. If she says you're not, Damien repeated with the patience of someone who had learned that emphasis sometimes required repetition. You hand everything to Marsh by phone, and you let the process work. Eva looked at him. I've spent 14 months building this case, she said. I know. I was shot for this case. I know that too. Damien. Eva. He said her name in the same way she had learned. He said things that were important, not loud, not forceful, but with a quality of weight that made it land differently than other words. You're not going to be useful to this case, or to anyone else, if you bleed out on a federal operations scene because you were too stubborn to let a doctor look at a wound. He looked at her directly. Let Lena check you, then we go. She held his gaze. The we was not lost on her. She had noticed it approximately 40 minutes ago and had not examined it yet because there had been no time, and because examining it felt like a luxury she hadn't earned yet, a thing that could wait until the immediate crisis resolved itself. Fine, she said. She stood up. Her side reminded her that standing was a position it had opinions about. She overrode the opinion and moved toward the door. For the record, she said as she passed him, I was not going to pass out. Noted, Damien said, and fell into step behind her. Ma. Lena worked in silence, and with the focused economy of someone who did not waste movement or words when neither were necessary. She cleaned the wound, which had in fact seeped more than Eva had acknowledged, rebandaged it with the kind of tight professional competence that communicated disapproval without requiring language, and administered a local anesthetic that Eva didn't ask the name of, and Lena didn't offer. 48 hours of genuine rest after this is over? Lena said, snapping her kit closed. Understood. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. 48 hours. Understood, Lena. Lena looked at her, then looked at Damien, who was standing by the door, then looked back at Eva with the expression of someone who had drawn a conclusion and was choosing not to articulate it. Don't get shot again today, Lena said, and left the room. Eva put her jacket back on. She likes you, Damien said. She likes very few people. Eva checked the time. 40 minutes. He was already moving. Once. Sorrel called at 6:22 with the news that changed the timeline. Bon is moving, she said. Not his vehicles he's calling out. He's on an encrypted line right now and I can't get the content, but I can see the pattern of it. He's making operational calls. Damien was in the front seat. Eva was in the back. Marcus was already pushing the speed limit. "How many calls?" Damien said. "6 in the past 12 minutes. Short structured. He's activating something." Sorrel's voice had the particular quality it got when she was managing multiple information streams, at once slightly faster, slightly flatter, like a machine that had been asked to run harder. "Damien, I think he knows about the vault." The car went quiet. "He can't know yet," Eva said from the back. "His people were at the vault. They reported it looked intact. They didn't go inside." "Someone did," Sorrel said. "I'm looking at a secondary camera feed from the building's roof access. 40 minutes after Cole's team reported the vault as secure, a different vehicle arrived. 2 individuals. They went inside." A pause. "They were inside for 8 minutes. 8 minutes was long enough." "He sent a second team," Damien said. "Without telling Cole." Sorrel's pause was deliberate. "He didn't trust Cole's report. He sent his own people to verify." Eva leaned forward between the seats. "Does Marsh know?" "Calling her now?" Eva said, already dialing. Marsh picked up on the first ring. "I was about to call you." "Bond knows the vault is empty," Eva said. "He's making operational calls right now. 6 calls in 12 minutes. He's going to run, or he's going to burn everything that's left. Either way, we have minutes, not an hour." "I need you to tell me where the drives are," Marsh said. "Right now." Eva gave her the location, the address, the wall, the case number. As she spoke, she heard Marsh relaying the information in parallel to someone else, her voice splitting between the phone and the room around her with practiced efficiency. "Moving on the residence now," Marsh said. "Marlowe? I'm 8 minutes out. You stay back until we have him contained." "Marsh, stay back," Marsh said with the firmness of someone who had made allowances and was done making them. "I mean it. You give me the evidence, you give me the case, and you let me do my job the way you've been doing yours. 8 minutes. A pause. "Okay," Eva said. She ended the call. She sat back. The car moved fast through streets that were beginning to show the first real signs of morning. A garbage truck 2 blocks over, a man walking a dog. The specific early light that looked like the world was loading in pieces rather than all at once. 8 minutes. "He's going to try to destroy what's left," Eva said. "Even without the vault contents, there are connections he has in the department, people whose names are in those files. He'll try to get word to them before Marsh moves." "Sorrel is monitoring his calls," Damien said. "Monitoring isn't intercepting." "No," Damien said. "It isn't." He said something else, then something quiet in a register that she registered but didn't quite catch, directed at Marcus rather than at her. Marcus nodded once and pressed the accelerator. She didn't ask. They were 4 blocks from Bond's residence when the first federal vehicle passed them, going the opposite direction at speed lights on no sirens. The particular controlled urgency of a federal operation that didn't want to announce itself until the last possible moment. Then a second vehicle. Then a third. "Marsh is moving," Eva said. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer it, and then answered it because unknown numbers at 6:28 in the morning during a federal operation were not calls you let go to voicemail. "Detective Marlowe." The voice was male, calm, precise, and entirely unfamiliar. "You don't know me." She went still. "Who is this?" "Someone who has been watching the past 4 days with considerable interest." A pause. "I work for Aldrich Bond." Damien's head turned. He had heard the voice through the phone. She had put it on speaker again, automatic. Now a habit that had formed without a conscious decision somewhere in the past 72 hours. "Worked," she said. Past tense. A quiet sound that might have been acknowledgement. "He's done. I understand that." The moment the federal vehicles turned onto the avenue, I understood it. Another pause. I'm not calling to protect him. Then why are you calling? Because there are two names in your file that you haven't been able to solidify. Names at the top of the Black Ridge network, people who have enough distance from the operational level that the transaction records alone won't be enough to prosecute. His voice remained precise and level. I can give you those names, documented, with enough supporting evidence to guarantee conviction. Eva's eyes met Damien's. In exchange for what? She said. Relocation and identity. Nothing else. I'm not asking for immunity from charges that don't exist. I've been careful. I'm asking for the ability to not be dead within the week. A pause. Bond's people who are still free will understand what I'm doing right now. I'd prefer to be somewhere else when they understand it. She thought for exactly 3 seconds. Name, she said. When I have a guarantee. I can't give you a guarantee. I can give you a direct line to the federal agent running this operation. That's the best I can do in the next 60 seconds. Silence. Give me the number, the voice said. She gave him Marsh's number and ended the call and immediately called Marsh. You're about to get a call, she said when Marsh picked up. Take it. The person calling has two names at the top of the network and documentation. He wants relocation. She paused. It's legitimate. Take the call. How do you know it's legitimate? Marsh said. Because if he were a decoy, Bond would have used someone I knew. A familiar voice, a familiar name, something designed to create hesitation. He used a stranger. She paused. It's someone Bond trusted enough to give access, and who is now getting out before the walls come down. Take the call. A breath on Marsh's end. All right. Eva ended the call. Marcus had slowed to a stop, 2 blocks from Bond's residence, behind a line of sight that kept them off the operational perimeter that Marsh's people had clearly established. She could see the outer edge of it. 2 agents in plain clothes at the corner managing the street with the kind of casual competence that looked like ordinary pedestrians until you knew what to look for. We wait here, Damien said. She wanted to argue. She didn't. She had given Marsh everything she had. The evidence, the case, the source, the names. Everything she had spent 14 months building and the past 4 days nearly dying to protect. She had put it in the right hands, and now the right hands needed space to work. She looked at the residence 2 blocks ahead at the unmarked vehicles and the positions she could half read from this distance, and she made herself stay in the car. Beside her, Damien said nothing. He was good at that, at occupying silence without filling it unnecessarily. She had noticed it early and kept noticing it the way you notice a quality that is rarer than it should be. 6 minutes passed, then her phone rang again. Marsh. We have him, Marsh said. Bond is in custody. His security personnel are being processed. Nobody fired a weapon. A pause. Your source called. The 2 names he provided, I know both of them. He's right that we didn't have enough without him. With his documentation, we do. Another pause. Marlowe. What? You did good work. Eva looked out the window at the morning light on the street. Thank you, she said. She ended the call. She sat in the quiet car for a moment. Then she said to no one in particular, and to the one person in particular who was sitting beside her, It's done. Damien said nothing. But she heard him let out a breath, very quiet, barely audible, and it was the first time in 4 days she had heard anything like relief from him, and it landed in the car between them, with a weight that neither of them chose to name. Heck, what came next had the quality of an aftermath, not peace. Aftermath was never peace. It was the rearrangement of tension rather than the absence of it. The moment when the immediate crisis resolved and all the things you had been not thinking about moved to the front. It was the moment when the adrenaline that had been holding everything in order let go, and what was underneath it turned out to be much heavier than the crisis itself. Marsh's people came to them at the car, professional, efficient, the exact right level of respectful given the circumstances. Eva answered questions. She gave her statement in the car, then in a mobile command vehicle that had been set up 2 streets over, then on her phone, with 2 additional federal attorneys who had been mobilized by the time the sun was fully up. She was thorough and precise, and the 14 months of documentation held up under every question, because she had built it to hold up. Damien was not part of those conversations. He waited. He waited in a way that was neither restless nor intrusive, standing outside the command vehicle, with Marcus making the occasional quiet call. When Eva came out after the second hour of statements, he was there. He always seemed to be there. She noticed that. "You need to eat something," he said when she reached him. "I need to eat something," she agreed. "And sleep. Lena's 48 hours starts now." He looked at her for a moment. "Where will you go?" It was a practical question. The facility was his. Her apartment was a crime scene. Ryan Cole had known her address, which meant it was compromised, which meant it was the first place Bond's remaining people would look if anyone was still looking. Her department contacts were a mixed landscape until the internal affairs investigation that was now inevitable had time to work through the names on her list. She thought about her options. "Marsh is arranging temporary housing through the federal program," she said. "I'll be there within the hour." He nodded. A pause stretched between them, the kind of pause that had its own character, its own specific gravity, that was not about uncertainty, but about the particular difficulty of ending something that had compressed 4 days into what felt like much longer and had not been simple in any of its parts. "The evidence I have about your organization," Eva said. "I know," Damien said. "I have a legal obligation." "I know that too." She looked at him. He looked back at her. "Whatever that process looks like," she said, "I'll make sure it's accurate. What you did and what Bond used your infrastructure for, I'll make sure those are clearly separated in the record." "That's more than I expected." "It's what's true." She paused. "You know I can't—" "I know," he said. "You don't have to explain it." She searched his face. He was doing the thing he did, that particular stillness, that quality of complete presence with no performance layered over the top of it. She had been a detective for a long time. She had interviewed hundreds of people, had learned to read the gap between what a person said and what they were actually experiencing with a level of accuracy that had become almost reflexive. She read him now. He was not asking for what he wasn't going to get. He was not pretending the situation was different from what it was. He was standing in the full reality of it, the consequences that were going to arrive for his organization, the exposure that was going to come, the process that was going to unfold, and he was standing in it without flinching. She had not expected that. She kept not expecting things from him, and he kept delivering them anyway. "Damien," she said. He waited. "Thank you," she said. "Not for not strategically, not because of what it accomplished." She held his gaze. "You found me in the street. You didn't have to. You could have kept driving, and I would have been dead before anyone found me, and none of what happened in the past 4 days would have happened." She paused. "Thank you for stopping." He looked at her for a long moment. "You asked me not to let them win," he said. "I know. I don't lose well," he said. It was almost something lighter than everything that had preceded it. "It's a significant character flaw." She almost smiled. She hadn't almost smiled in 4 days. "I know," she said again. "I've read your file." He made a sound that, in another context from another person, she might have called a quiet laugh. Then Marsh appeared from around the command vehicle with her efficient walk and her 3 phones, and the expression of a woman who had 17 things to manage and was currently managing all of them. "Marlowe," she said, "we need you for one more round. The attorneys want to walk through the chain of custody on the drives." She glanced at Damien with the neutral professional assessment of a federal agent cataloging a situation. "Mr. Vale." Damien said nothing. "You understand we'll need to speak with you as well," Marsh said, "in due course." "I understand," Damien said. Marsh held his gaze for a moment, the kind of moment where 2 professionals from completely opposing sides of a very significant line Acknowledge that the line exists, and that they are both fully aware of where it falls. Then she looked at Eva. 5 minutes. She went back around the vehicle. Eva looked at Damien one more time. I'll be in touch, she said. I know, he said. She walked toward the command vehicle. She did not look back. Not because it cost her something, but because looking back at that moment would have been the wrong kind of acknowledgement of a thing that she wasn't ready to name yet. And she was a detective, and detectives dealt in what they could establish, not in what they suspected. She dealt in evidence, and the evidence of what existed between herself and Damien Vale was still assembling itself. She let it assemble.
Jitatar.
3 days later, Ryan Cole sat across a table from Eva Marlowe and 3 federal attorneys in a room that had the particular hum of recorded air and institutional lighting. She had asked to be in the room. Marsh had allowed it because the case was Eva's, and because Marsh, whatever her other qualities, understood the difference between professional distance and professional accountability. Cole looked like 3 days of federal custody looked. Not broken. His face still had its structure. His eyes still had their alertness, but compressed like a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a long time, and had recently set it down, and discovered that setting it down did not actually feel the way he had imagined it would feel. He looked at Eva when she came in, and something moved across his face that was too complex and too fast to fully read. She sat down across from him. She opened her folder. Before we begin the formal statement, she said, and her voice was clear and level and completely professional, I want to say one thing. Cole waited. 9 years, she said. We were partners for 9 years. I trusted you, completely. And I know that whatever the attorneys are going to walk through today, the money, the meetings, the calls, the decisions, I know there was a version of you before all of that who was a good cop. She paused. That version matters to me. Not because it excuses what you did. It doesn't. But because it means the testimony you're about to give actually means something. She looked at him directly. You understand what I'm saying? Cole's jaw tightened. His eyes were very steady and very unhappy. Yeah, he said. I understand. Then let's begin, Eva said. And they began. Cole talked for 7 hours. He talked about the first conversation with a mid-level operative who had approached him 3 years ago with a problem that had seemed small, that had required only a small cooperation. A single report altered, a single investigation steered. He talked about the second conversation, and the third, and the way each one had built on the last, until the structure was so complete that dismantling any part of it would have brought the whole thing down on him. He talked about Jerome Pettit and what Pettit had told him about Bond. He talked about the other officers, 12 names, 8 of whom were on Eva's list and 4 of whom were not. He talked about the system, how it worked, how money moved through it, how decisions were made and enforced. He talked about the decision to take Eva to the industrial district. He got very quiet when he talked about that. You understood what you were doing, Eva said. Yes, Cole said. You made a decision, yes? Walk me through it, she said with the precision of someone who needed the record to be complete regardless of what the record felt like to receive. He walked her through it. Every step. The drive, the conversation, the moment. He didn't dress it up, and he didn't minimize it, and he sat with the full weight of it in the room, in a way that Eva noted, and that she knew the federal attorneys noted, and that she suspected Ryan Cole himself was only beginning to understand, was the one thing that was going to matter most at his sentencing. Not the cooperation, as valuable as that was. The fact that he sat with it. When it was over, when the last formal question had been asked and answered, and the recording had been stopped, the attorneys left to confer, and it was just Eva and Cole in the room for a moment. Eva, he said. She was gathering her folder. You called me, he said. You gave me the way out. After what He stopped. You didn't have to do that. She looked at him. No, she said. I didn't. Why did you? She thought about it for a moment, not about what to say, but actually thought about why gave the question the honest attention it deserved. "Because I needed you in a courtroom," she said. "That's the real answer." Cole nodded slowly. "And the other answer," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Because you were still reachable," she said. "The version of you that I worked with for 9 years was still in there somewhere, and I needed to believe that version could still make one right decision." She paused. "I was right. It was not forgiveness. She was not ready for forgiveness, and she might never be, and she was honest enough with herself to know the difference between a professional acknowledgement and an emotional one. But it was true, and Ryan Cole seemed to understand the distance between those two things and to accept it. He nodded once. She picked up her folder and walked out. Aldrich Bond was arraigned on 47 counts 3 days after his arrest. He said nothing at the arraignment, and his attorney said very little, which was what attorneys did when the evidence was so thorough that saying very little was the only strategy left. Eva was not at the arraignment. She was at a temporary apartment that the federal housing program had arranged, which was small and quiet, and had a window that faced east, and she was sleeping for the first time in 5 days. Actual sleep. Lena's 48 hours beginning to mean something concrete. She woke up to 3 missed calls from Marsh and a text from a number she had memorized but not saved. "It's holding. All of it." She stared at the message for a moment. She typed back, "I know, we built it right." A pause. "Then you built it right. I just drove the car." She sat with that for a long time. Outside her window, the city was doing what cities did. Moving and breathing, and carrying its history, and its damage, and its moments of grace forward, without asking permission. Black Ridge in the morning light looked like what it was, a place full of people who were trying to live their lives inside a system that had been quietly working against them for 11 years, and who didn't yet know that the system was broken now, and that something was going to have to be built in its place. That was going to take a long time. She was a detective. She was good at long. She typed back one more message. "What happens to you now?" She watched the screen. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Then I'm working on that." Which was, she understood, the most honest answer he could give. Not evasion, not performance, but the exact truth of a man standing at the edge of a set of consequences he had chosen and was not yet sure of the shape of. She put the phone down. She lay back. The city moved outside her window, and Detective Eva Marlowe, who had been shot and left for dead in a dark street 7 days ago, and had spent those 7 days fighting her way back through every layer of the thing that had tried to kill her, closed her eyes and let herself rest. Not because it was over. It wasn't over. Ryan Cole still had to testify. 47 counts had to be prosecuted. 12 officers had to face departmental and criminal review. The internal investigation that was going to tear through the Black Ridge Police Department like a cold wind through an open door was only beginning. And Damien Vale, the most feared man in the city's underground world, the man who had found her dying in a dark street and chosen something he had never chosen before, was going to have to stand in front of his own consequences. None of that was over. But in this moment, in this quiet room with the morning light coming through the east window, and her body finally beginning to believe it was allowed to heal, Eva Marlowe understood something she had not understood fully until right now. She had walked into the dark district 7 days ago as one kind of detective. She was not the same detective anymore. Something had cracked open in her, not broken, not damaged, but opened the way things open when they are tested past the point they thought they could bear, and discover there is more on the other side. She was not sure what to do with that yet. She was not sure what it meant for the cases ahead, or the city ahead, or the particular complicated reality of a mafia boss who drove too fast and talked too quietly and had stopped his car in a dark street for a reason that neither of them had been fully able to explain. She would figure it out. She was good at figuring things out. It was what she did. The call from Marsh came on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after Bond's arrest, and it started the way calls from Marsh always started: direct, no preamble. The voice of someone who had already processed whatever she was about to say and was delivering the conclusion rather than the journey. "We have a problem," Marsh said. Eva was at the federal housing apartment, her second cup of coffee untouched beside her. The case files she had been reviewing spread across the small table in the order she had learned to keep them. She had been back on limited duty for 4 days desk work, only Marsh's condition non-negotiable, and the limitation had been grinding at her in the specific way that enforced stillness always grounded her, like pressure applied to something that needed to move. "What kind of problem?" Eva said. "The kind with a name." A pause. "Judge Harold Venn." Eva went still. Venn. The name was on the periphery of her documentation. One of the names she had flagged, but not been able to solidify one of the two that the anonymous source on the phone had referenced. A federal judge, 14 years on the bench. The kind of institutional presence that accumulated so much gravity over time that it became almost impossible to look at directly. "He's filing a motion to suppress," Marsh said. "He's claiming the vault access was an illegal search. No warrant, no authorization conducted by a civilian with criminal associations." Another pause. "He's calling for the evidence to be excluded." "He can't," Eva said. "The chain of custody is—" "He's not challenging the chain of custody. He's challenging the legality of the initial access." Marsh's voice was even and flat and carrying the specific weight of someone delivering news that is worse than it sounds. "And Eva Venn has the standing to make this stick. He has 2 colleagues on the appellate panel who owe him significant professional debts. If this motion succeeds, we lose the vault evidence. And without the vault evidence, Bond walks." Eva said it so Marsh didn't have to, or takes a significantly reduced plea that doesn't touch the full scope of the network. Marsh paused. "Cole's testimony holds regardless. The 12 officers, the Black Ridge operation, those survive. But the interstate charges the 11 years across 4 cities, the full architecture that all depends on the vault." Eva looked at her coffee, looked at the files. "Venn is on the list," she said. "He is. One of the 2 names the source gave us." "Yes." Marsh's voice shifted slightly, not softer, just more direct in a different way. "He's filing this motion because he knows his name is in what we pulled from that vault. He's trying to destroy the evidence before it destroys him. He's panicking. He's a federal judge with 14 years of favors to call in. The distinction matters." Marsh paused. "I need you in the office this afternoon. We need to build a counter-argument that addresses the illegal search question directly and completely." Eva was already standing, already moving toward her jacket. "I'll be there in an hour," she said. "Eva." Marsh's voice held something that was almost, not quite, but almost reluctance. "The counter-argument is going to require us to fully document the circumstances of the vault access. All of them. Everything." Eva understood what Marsh was saying. She understood it completely. Everything meant Damien. Everything meant putting his name in a formal federal record in connection with an evidence-gathering operation that had saved a major case, but that had been conducted outside any legal framework that a courtroom would recognize. "I know," Eva said. "It may accelerate the timeline on his situation." "I know that too." A pause. "I'll be there in an hour," Eva said again, and ended the call. She stood in the quiet apartment with her jacket half on, and her mind already 3 steps ahead, running the counter-argument, running the implications, running the particular and very uncomfortable geometry of a situation in which the thing that saved the case might also be the thing that was used to destroy it. She picked up her phone. She opened the contact saved as V. She typed, "We need to talk, today. Can you meet?" She watched the screen, 30 seconds, then named the place. Japierre. She chose a diner 6 blocks from the federal building Public Ordinary, the kind of place that was too busy at noon to pay attention to any particular conversation. She got there first and took a booth in the back and ordered coffee she didn't need and sat with her hands flat on the table and thought about what she was going to say. She had been thinking about it since Marsh's call. She was still thinking about it when Damien walked through the door. He looked different than he had 4 days ago when she had seen him briefly at the command vehicle for what Marsh had called a preliminary conversation. He looked like a man who had been in a series of meetings with attorneys and was carrying the weight of those meetings without letting the weight change his posture. He sat across from her and picked up the menu and set it down and looked at her. "Ven is filing a suppression motion," Eva said. Damien's expression didn't change. "I heard. How? Sorrel monitors federal court filings." A pause. "It was logged this morning at 7:42. "Of course it was. If the motion succeeds, the vault evidence is excluded and Bond's exposure is significantly reduced." His voice was even and completely clear. "I've already talked to my attorney." "Then you know what the counter-argument requires." He looked at her directly. "It requires full documentation of the vault access, including who authorized entry, who was present, and the means by which access was obtained." "Yes. My name in a federal record," he said, "in connection with an evidence-gathering operation conducted on behalf of a federal investigation. It would accelerate." "I know what it would accelerate." He didn't say it harshly. He said it in the tone of a man who had already done the calculation and arrived at the answer and was not going to pretend otherwise. "How quickly?" "Marsh thinks within 30 days she'd have enough to move on the organizational charges, your infrastructure, the shell companies, the operations that Bond was running through. All of that becomes prosecutable with your direct involvement in the vault access as the established foundation." Damien was quiet for a moment. The diner moved around them, a waitress 2 tables over a couple near the window. The low, constant sound of a place full of ordinary people having ordinary midday conversations that had nothing to do with federal prosecutions or suppression motions or the particular cost of having stopped a car in a dark street 11 days ago. "Then we do it," Damien said. Eva looked at him. "It's not your decision alone," she said carefully. "I wanted you to understand the full—" "Eva." He said her name in the way she had come to recognize as meaning, "Stop managing the delivery and give me the direct version." "I know what it means. Tell me what you need from me." She took a breath. "A formal statement," she said. "Voluntary. Detailing your presence at the vault. The means of access, the chain of evidence collection as it occurred. Your attorney present. Everything on the record." She paused. "It gives Marsh the foundation to counter Ven's motion. It establishes the evidence as legally defensible because it was voluntarily documented by the individual who facilitated access, which shifts the legal framework from illegal search to cooperative civilian assistance." "Cooperative civilian assistance," Damien said. "It's a legal distinction that your attorney will explain more precisely than I understand the distinction." He looked at her steadily. "And in exchange for this voluntary statement, what do I receive?" "Nothing," Eva said. "No immunity, no formal cooperation agreement, no reduced exposure." She held his gaze. "What you receive is a record that clearly shows the difference between what you chose to do and what Bond was doing in your name. What you receive is an accurate account." She paused. "I told you I would make sure those things were separated in the record. This is how I do that." He was quiet for a long time. Outside the window of the diner, the city moved in its midday way, ordinary and indifferent, and carrying its history forward without ceremony. "When?" he said. "This afternoon, if you can." "I can." He picked up his coffee and held it without drinking it. "There's something else." She waited. "Marcus," he said. She hadn't expected that word. "My driver," Damien said. "He's been with me for 6 years. He drove the car. He helped get you into the back seat. He was present for the vault operation." He set the coffee down. "Whatever I put in a formal statement, Marcus is in it. I won't exclude him to protect myself." Eva looked at him. "That might complicate his situation," she said carefully. "I know, but I won't give a statement that removes him from the record to make my own look better." His voice was completely flat and completely certain. He knew the risk. He made the choice. His name is in the record, or mine isn't. She sat with that for a moment. She thought about what it meant about a man who ran an organization that operated by its own brutal internal logic, who had spent 20 years making decisions that most people would never be able to justify, who was sitting in a diner booth and refusing to scrub a loyal employee from a federal record, even when doing so would have been operationally straightforward and legally cleaner. "I'll talk to Marsh," she said. "That's all I'm asking." She nodded. They sat for a moment in the particular quiet of two people who have said the necessary things and are not yet ready to say the other things, the things that lived underneath the case and the motion and the formal statements and the federal record, the things that neither of them had named yet, because naming them required a stillness that the past 11 days had not allowed. "Damien," she said. He looked at her. "Why did you stop the car?" she said. It was the question she had been carrying since the first night. Not the operational version. She understood the operational logic by now, understood how their interests had aligned, understood the rational structure of the choice. She was asking about the other thing, the thing that had preceded the calculation. He was quiet for a long moment. "You were dying," he said. "People die in this city every night. Not in front of me." He said it the same way he had said it the first night, not as a performance, not as poetry, just as a fact. "I've made a lot of decisions based on what made sense strategically, what was clean, what removed complications and left clean lines." He paused. "Leaving you there would have been clean." But you looked up at me." He looked at the table. "You looked up at me and you said don't let them win. And you said it the way someone says something they mean so completely that there's nothing left over, no fear, no performance, just the thing itself." He looked back at her. "I couldn't leave that in the street." Eva was very still. "That's not a strategic reason," she said. "No," he said. "It isn't." She looked at him for a long time. "Okay," she said. She didn't say more than that, but she held it, held what he had said and what it meant and what it was going to require her to think about when the case was settled and the formal statements were done and the particular compressed urgency of the past 11 days finally resolved into something with more space in it. She held it the way you hold something fragile in a hand that is still learning whether it's strong enough. "This afternoon," she said. "This afternoon," he confirmed. She left money on the table for the coffee and stood up, and he stood up, and they walked out of the diner onto the midday street without touching and without looking back at the booth where the conversation had happened and without either of them saying the thing that was under all the other things. Not yet. The formal statement took 3 hours. Damien sat across from 2 federal attorneys and Marsh herself with his own attorney beside him, and he gave them everything: the night, the street, the decision, the facility, the calls, the vault, the evidence collection. He gave it in the precise and sequential voice of someone who had decided to do a thing completely and was not going to do it halfway. He named Marcus. Marsh noted it. Her expression registered nothing except the slight tightening around her eyes that Eva had learned to read as acknowledgement of something unexpected. Eva sat at the corner of the table, not interrogating, not directing, just present, because she had asked to be present, and Marsh had allowed it for the same reason she always allowed Eva's requests, which was that Eva's requests were usually correct. When it was done, when the last question had been answered, and the recording had been stopped and the attorneys were gathering their materials, Marsh looked at Damien across the table with the flat professional assessment she gave everyone and everything. "Mr. Vale," she said, "what you've given us today is going to make the counter-argument to Ven's motion significantly stronger." "I know," Damien said. "It's also going to accelerate the federal review of your organization's activities." "I know that too." Marsh held his gaze. "Is there anything you'd like to say about your organization's activities before that review proceeds?" Damien's attorney put a hand on his arm. A standard gesture, the professional reflexive caution of a lawyer who had learned that voluntary statements rarely improved a client's position. Damien looked at his attorney. Then he looked at Marsh. "My organization used methods that federal law prohibits," he said. I operated outside legal frameworks for 20 years. I understand that those facts carry consequences, and I'm not here to argue otherwise." He paused. "What I will say is that the operations run through my infrastructure by Bon and Petit were not authorized by me, were not conducted with my knowledge, and were in direct violation of the internal standards I maintained within my organization." He paused again. "I recognize that the concept of internal standards within a criminal organization might seem paradoxical to this room. I can't resolve that paradox for you. I can only tell you that it's true." Marsh looked at him for a long time. "Thank you for your time," she said. Damien stood. His attorney stood. They moved toward the door. At the door, Damien stopped. He turned back. He looked at Eva, not at Marsh, not at the attorneys, just at Eva. "The case holds," he said. It wasn't a question. "The case holds," she said. He nodded once. He left. Ven's motion was denied 6 days later. The ruling came down on a Friday afternoon from the appellate panel, 2-1, the one dissent being from the Judge Marsh had flagged as owing Ven a professional debt, which was the one dissent anyone had expected. The majority opinion ran to 11 pages and cited the voluntary disclosure documentation from Damien's statement as the foundational basis for upholding the evidence chain. Marsh called Eva when the ruling came through. "It held," Marsh said. "I know. I'm reading the opinion now. The Ven investigation is being fast-tracked based on what we pulled from the vault. He'll be in front of a grand jury within 60 days. A pause. "Bond's attorney called 20 minutes ago. They want to talk plea." Eva looked at the ruling on her screen. "Don't take anything that touches less than the full 47 counts. I wasn't planning to." Another pause, shorter this time, with a different quality. "Marlowe. The Federal Review of Vale's organization. The recommendation came through this morning." Eva closed the opinion document. "And," she said, "full cooperative review. His attorney has been notified. He has 30 days to produce organizational records, and then we begin formal proceedings." Marsh's voice was careful now, not gentle, just precise in a way that acknowledged the weight of what she was saying. The statement he gave on the vault access is going to be a significant factor in how the proceedings are structured. His voluntary cooperation, the separation of his activities from Bond's unauthorized operations, the evidence he provided, it doesn't grant immunity, but it creates a foundation for the kind of negotiated process that's more likely to result in... She paused, searching for the exact right word, measured outcomes. "Measured outcomes," Eva said. "It means he's not going to disappear into a federal penitentiary without the full record being considered," Marsh said. "That's the most accurate thing I can tell you." Eva was quiet. "Okay," she said. "Eva." Marsh paused again. "Are you all right?" It was the second time in this entire ordeal that Marsh had asked her that. The first time had been in the car before the operation, when Eva had still been running on a combination of momentum and will, and very little else. This time the question landed differently. This time there was space for it. "I'm working on it," Eva said. Marsh made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh that Eva had ever heard from her. "Fair enough. Take the weekend. Monday we have Bond's plea negotiations and I need you sharp." "I'll be sharp." "I know you will." A pause. "Good work, Marlowe. All of it." The call ended. Eva sat at her table with the phone in her hand and the case files spread around her and the Friday afternoon light coming through the east window, and she let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Not just the ruling, not just the plea negotiations, not just the 47 counts and the grand jury timeline and the measured outcomes that were going to unfold over the next months. All of it. A dark street. A man who stopped his car. 14 months of work that had nearly died in a district where nobody drove unless they were lost. 9 years of a partnership that had turned out to be something other than what she had built it to be. 4 days that had been the most compressed and exhausting and clarifying 4 days of her professional life. She felt all of it at once. It was not comfortable. It was not supposed to be comfortable. It was real. She went to see Marcus that evening. Not Damian Marcus, his driver, his loyal employee of 6 years, the man who had lifted her legs and helped carry her to a car without asking questions, and had been named in a federal statement because the man he worked for refused to erase him from the record. Marcus was at a coffee shop near the East Side. He had texted her the address, which surprised her until she understood that Damian had probably told him she might reach out, which surprised her less. He was a compact man in his early 40s, with the careful, watchful quality of someone who had spent a long time paying attention to things other people missed. He stood when she came in, and she waved him back down and sat across from him. "Detective," he said. "Eva," she said. He looked at her with the direct, assessing look that she recognized from the back seat of his car 11 days ago. "You wanted to see me." "I wanted to say thank you," she said, directly, "for what you did that night." He was quiet for a moment. "I drove the car." "You helped carry me to it," she said. "When you didn't know what I was going to survive. When you had no way of knowing how any of this was going to land." She paused. "That cost you something." "It might cost me more yet," he said without bitterness. "It might," she agreed. "I'm sorry for that." He looked at her steadily. "Are you—" The question was direct and not unkind, just genuinely curious, the question of a man who had been in situations where sorry was a word people used when they meant something else entirely, and who had learned to ask. "Yes," she said. "I'm not sorry the case was built. I'm not sorry the evidence held. I'm not sorry Bond is looking at 47 counts." She paused. "But I am sorry that the people who chose to do a right thing are carrying consequences for it. That part I'm sorry about." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "He told me what you said," Marcus said, "about separating what he did from what Bond was doing in his name. About making sure the record was accurate. I meant it. I know you did." He picked up his coffee. "He doesn't say things like that about people very often." Eva said nothing. "In 6 years," Marcus said, "I've seen him trust 2 people completely. One of them died. The other one's sitting across from me right now." Eva was very still. "Marcus, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know," he said calmly. "I'm just saying it out loud. So it exists somewhere other than in my head." He set his coffee down. "Whatever happens in the next 30 days, whatever the federal review looks like, he made the choice he made, and he'll live with the consequences of it. That's always been who he is." He paused. "But he stopped the car because of you, specifically. Not because of who you were professionally or what it could gain him strategically. Because of you." She looked at the table. "I know," she said quietly. "Okay," Marcus said. "Good." They finished the coffee, and she thanked him again and walked back out into the Friday evening street and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, with the city moving around her and the weight of what Marcus had just said sitting somewhere in her chest that she hadn't quite located yet. She took out her phone. She opened the contact saved as V. She typed, "Ruling came through. The motion was denied. The case holds." She watched the screen. 3 dots. "Then I know." "My attorney called." A pause. Then she typed, "How are you?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "Working on it." She stared at those 3 words. She thought about a diner booth and a dark street and a man who had said, "I couldn't leave that in the street," without making it sound like anything other than the precise and literal truth of what he meant. She typed, "The formal review starts in 30 days. I know. Your attorney is prepared." "Yes." A pause. Then she typed the thing she had been carrying since the diner. "You're going to face this, and you're going to do it the right way, and the record is going to reflect what actually happened. All of it. I'll make sure of that." She watched the screen. A long pause. The longest yet. "Then I know you will. That's not something I question." Something moved in her chest. She recognized it now, had been recognizing it for days, and setting it aside and letting it exist in the space she'd been building for it. the space that the case and the urgency and the formal statements had been holding at bay. She typed, "When this settles. When the 30 days are done and the review is underway and everything is in the right hands, I'd like to have a conversation that isn't about the case." She hit send before she could think about it too carefully. She stood on the sidewalk. She waited. The city moved. A full minute passed. Then I'd like that too. Then after a beat, the diner was good. Neutral ground. Good coffee. She almost smiled. She did smile, actually. A real one. The second one in 11 days and the second one in 11 days had arrived within 24 hours of the first, which told her something about trajectory. She typed back, "The coffee was terrible." Immediate response. It was. I didn't want to say anything. She stood on the sidewalk and smiled at her phone, like a person who hadn't smiled in a very long time and had just remembered what it felt like. Then she put the phone in her pocket and looked at the city and thought about what came next. Bond's plea negotiations on Monday. Cole's formal testimony in 3 weeks. Ven's grand jury in 60 days. The federal review of Damien's organization beginning to unfold across the next 30. 12 officers facing departmental and criminal proceedings. The internal investigation moving through the Black Ridge PD, like the cold wind it needed to be. A city that had been governed by a hidden architecture for 11 years, starting the slow, painful process of rebuilding without it. None of it was small. All of it was going to take time. She was a detective. She was good at time. She started walking. The thing about Aftermath was that it didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in layers, each one uncovering the next, each one requiring a different kind of attention than the one before. The first layer was the professional one, the formal proceedings, the court dates, the testimony, the filings. That layer Eva was equipped for. She had been equipped for it for 14 months. She moved through it with the precision of someone who had built every piece of it carefully and knew exactly where each one belonged. The second layer was the personal one, and that one was harder. 9 years was a long time to be partners with someone. 9 years of shared cases and shared coffee, and a particular shorthand that developed between two people who spent 40 hours a week processing the worst things human beings did to each other, and had to find a way to carry that without being crushed by it. 9 years of a partnership that had been real. She knew it had been real even in the light of everything that had happened after. The version of Ryan Cole that had preceded his corruption had been a genuine person and a genuine partner, and she had trusted him completely. That trust had been used against her. She was going to have to figure out what she did with that, not legally, not procedurally, but personally. Somewhere in the machinery of her internal life was a question about what it meant to have been betrayed so thoroughly by someone you had chosen, and that question was not going to be answered by a federal ruling or a plea negotiation. She thought about this during the long hours at her desk, working through the procedural details of the case, and she thought about it at night in the federal housing apartment when the work was done and the silence had its own character. She was not someone who fell apart easily. She was also not someone who pretended things weren't what they were. It was going to take time. She gave it time. On the 15th day after Bond's arrest, Ryan Cole gave his formal testimony in front of a federal grand jury. Eva sat in the observation room behind the glass and watched him answer every question with the particular combination of precision and exhaustion of a man who had decided to tell the whole truth and was discovering that the whole truth was heavier than he had imagined. He testified for 4 hours. He did not look at the glass. She did not expect him to. When it was over, when the grand jury had recessed and Cole was being taken back to federal custody, he passed the observation room door in the hallway and he stopped. He couldn't see her through the glass. But he stopped. He stood there for exactly 3 seconds. Then he kept walking. She sat in the observation room with her hands flat on the table and looked at the empty seat where he had sat for 4 hours and thought about 9 years and what they meant and what they didn't mean and what she was going to do with both of those things. Then she picked up her files and she stood up and she walked out of the room. Forward. Always forward. The phone call she had not expected came on the 20th day. Unknown number. Not the same unknown number as before. Different pattern. Different exchange. She answered it because she had learned to answer unknown numbers. Detective Marlowe. The voice was female, middle-aged, precise. My name is Eleanor Vass. I'm an investigative journalist with the National Record. I've been following the Bond case. A pause. I have information that I believe is relevant to your investigation, and I believe you have information that is relevant to a story I've been building for 2 years. Iva leaned back in her chair. What kind of information? She said. The kind that involves Aldrich Bond's activities in 3 cities I don't believe your federal team has fully mapped. Yet, Vass said, I've been working a parallel investigation. Different angle, different sources, same destination. Another pause. And the kind that involves a name your investigation has approached but not yet secured. What name? Senator Raymond Cross. Eva was absolutely still. Senator Raymond Cross. 5 terms. Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. A man so embedded in the institutional fabric of federal law enforcement that his name appeared in the margins of cases as context rather than as subject always adjacent, never central, never quite close enough to touch. You have documentation, Eva said. I have 18 months of documentation, Vass said, and I've been waiting to find someone inside the federal investigation who I trusted enough to share it with. A pause. Your name has come up repeatedly as someone who builds cases correctly and doesn't allow the scope of a target to determine whether the case gets made. Where did you hear that? Agent Marsh, Vass said simply. Eva made a mental note to talk to Marsh about what she told journalists, and then immediately acknowledged that if Marsh had pointed this woman toward her, Marsh had a reason. Send me what you have, Eva said. Encrypted. I'll give you the secure line. I'd prefer to meet in person. Then name the place. A pause. The diner on Alcott Street, Vass said. Tomorrow, noon. Eva looked at her calendar. Bond's plea negotiation was at 10. She could make noon. I'll be there, she said. She ended the call. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand and the familiar feeling of a case expanding past its original edges. The feeling she had carried through 14 months of investigation, every time a new thread appeared and turned out to be connected to 3 other threads she hadn't known about yet. Senator Raymond Cross. She opened a new file on her laptop. She started building. Because that was what she did. That was always what she did. And somewhere across the city, in the particular circumstances that the next 30 days were going to create, Damian Vale was standing at the edge of his own consequences, with the same quality of forward momentum that she recognized because she carried it herself. The momentum of a person who had made a choice they believed in and was now following that choice all the way to wherever it led. Whatever that looked like, however long it took, they were both in their different ways moving toward the same thing. A city that answered for itself, and the long, difficult, necessary work of building something honest in the space where the corruption used to be. Eleanor Vass was already at the diner when Eva arrived, which told Eva something about her before a word was spoken. Punctuality in a journalist working a sensitive case meant either discipline or anxiety. And the woman sitting in the corner booth with a coffee and a closed laptop and eyes that tracked Eva from the door looked like discipline all the way through. She was in her mid-50s, compact, with the particular quality of stillness that belonged to people who had spent a long time watching things carefully. She stood when Eva reached the table and extended a hand, and her grip was firm and brief and professional. Detective Marlowe, she said. Ms. Vass. Eva sat down. You said 18 months. I did. Vass opened the laptop. I started the Cross investigation independently before Bond's arrest, before any of the Blackridge network became publicly known. I was working a campaign finance angle, irregular contributions to Cross's last 3 Senate races, funneled through a series of nonprofit structures that didn't hold up to scrutiny. She turned the laptop toward Eva. What I found when I pulled the nonprofit structures apart was Bond's fingerprints. Eva looked at the screen. The documentation was meticulous. She could see that immediately, the way it was organized, the sequential layering of evidence, the cross-references. The work of someone who understood that a story without a foundation was not a story at all. How far does it go? Eva said. Cross has been taking money from Bond's network for 7 years, Vass said. In exchange for what specifically, I have documentary evidence for 4 instances. Federal appropriations steered toward contracts that benefited Bond-affiliated entities. One instance of a federal investigation not yours being quietly redirected at the subcommittee level. She paused. And one instance that is significantly more serious than the others. Eva looked up from the screen. Vass's expression was level, but carrying something underneath it. The expression of a person who has been alone with a very heavy piece of information for too long and is relieved to be setting it down in front of someone else. The Venn motion, Voss said. Eva went absolutely still. Cross contacted Venn, Vass said. 4 days before the motion was filed. I have phone records, not content, just contact, but I also have a source inside Cross's office who was present for part of a conversation. She paused. Cross told Venn that the suppression motion needed to happen, not suggested, told. The implications of that landed in Eva's chest like something with physical weight. Venn's motion had not been Venn panicking independently. It had been orchestrated. Cross had seen the Bond arrest and understood that the vault evidence, the full 11 years across 4 cities, would eventually trace back to him, and he had reached into his network and pulled a lever. He tried to kill the case, Eva said. He tried to kill the case, Vass confirmed. And when the motion failed, she closed the laptop. My source inside Cross's office contacted me yesterday. Cross is preparing to leave the country. He has a property in a country without extradition. He's telling his staff he's taking a personal leave. She looked at Eva directly. He's going to run, within the week, I believe. Eva was already reaching for her phone. I need to make a call, she said. I know, Vass said. That's why I'm here. Marsh answered on the first ring. I'm in a meeting, Marsh said. Get out of it, Eva said. Right now. I need 5 minutes. A pause, the sound of a door. Then Marsh's voice lower and more direct. What happened? Eva told her. All of it, Vass. The documentation, the Cross-Venn connection, the property, the timeline. She told it in the compressed, sequential way she had learned to deliver critical information. No editorializing, just fact and implication and urgency. Marsh was silent for 4 seconds after Eva finished. 4 seconds was a long time for Diane Marsh. How solid is the source inside Cross's office? Marsh said. I haven't vetted the source personally. Vass has 18 months of interaction with this person, and she's standing in front of me right now, and she doesn't look like someone who takes sources at face value. Eva glanced at Voss, who was watching her with the patient focus of someone who understood that this phone call was the axis on which the next several things turned. Solid enough to act on, I think, given the timeline. If Cross gets to that property, we lose him, Eva said, completely. Another silence. I need the journalist's documentation in my hands within the hour, Marsh said. And I need you to understand that if this moves the way it needs to move, it moves fast. We won't have time for the standard review process. I know, Eva. Marsh's voice shifted into the register it used when something mattered at a level beyond the procedural. If Cross is who this says he is, if he's been running interference from inside the Senate Judiciary Committee, then what we're about to do is going to be the most visible thing either of us has ever been part of. Eva looked at Vass. She thought about 14 months of work and a dark street and 47 counts and 11 years of a network that had been built one small compromise at a time until it had corrupted everything it touched. Good, she said. Let it be visible. My office, 1 hour. Eva ended the call. She looked at Voss. Can you be at the federal building in an hour with everything you have? Vass had already closed the laptop and was putting on her coat. I've been waiting 18 months for someone to ask me that. They left the diner together and went out into the midday city, and Eva felt it the particular forward momentum of a case that had found its next edge. The feeling she had learned to recognize and lean into rather than resist the feeling that meant the work was not finished and the work was worth finishing. The documentation transfer took 2 hours. What Vass had was even more thorough than what she had described in the diner, not just phone records and campaign finance irregularities, but a paper trail that layered on top of what Iva's investigation had already built and what the vault had produced, created a prosecutable record of Senator Raymond Cross's involvement in Bond's network that was comprehensive enough to make even Marsh go quiet for an extended moment when she finished reviewing the summary. "This is enough," Marsh said finally. She said it in the tone of someone confirming a structural load-bearing calculation. "Combined with what we already have, this is more than enough." "How quickly can you move on the arrest?" Eva said. "Travel restrictions go up today. That's the first step. We lock down his passport before he gets to that property." Marsh looked at the documentation spread across her conference table. "Formal arrest within 72 hours. We do this correctly. We do not give him or his attorneys a single procedural angle to exploit." "Agreed." "And the journalist, she cooperated fully," Eva said. "She brought it to us rather than publishing it, which she didn't have to do. She's asking for a first publication agreement once the arrest is made." Marsh considered this for exactly the time it required. "Fair," she said. "I'll have the agreement drafted." Eva stood. "I'll be in the office first thing tomorrow." "Eva." Marsh stopped her at the door. "The Cross arrest is going to put the Bond case on the front page of every paper in the country. When that happens, every element of how this investigation was conducted is going to be examined." She paused. "Including the vault access." "I know." "Including Damien Vale's role in the vault access." "I know that too." Eva looked at her steadily. "The record is accurate. Everything is documented. Whatever examination comes, it will hold." Marsh held her gaze. "And your personal." "My professional judgment is sound," Eva said. "It has been throughout." A long moment. Marsh nodded once. "I know it has," she said. Eva walked out. She called Damien from the car. He answered on the second ring. "Eva." "Something happened," she said. "I need you to hear it from me before it's anywhere else." She told him about Vass, about Cross, about the travel restrictions going up today, and the arrest within 72 hours, and what came after. He was quiet through all of it. When she finished, he said, "Cross." "Yes." "He orchestrated the Venn motion." "Yes." Another pause. "How high does this go?" "We don't know yet. The Cross documentation is the top of what we can currently see. There may be more above it. There may not be." She paused. "But Damien, when this arrest happens, it's going to be national. The Bond case, the vault, all of it gets examined again in that context. Your name is in the record." "I know." "It's going to get attention." "I know." "Are you—" She stopped, recalibrated. "Is your attorney prepared for that level of attention?" "She's been prepared since the statement," Damien said. "She said at the time that the statement was the right decision strategically as well as every other way. I told her I didn't make it for strategic reasons." A pause. "She told me that was either very principled or very naive, and she wasn't sure which." "What did you tell her?" "I told her probably both." Eva sat with that for a moment. "Damien," she said. "What?" "The Federal Review," she said carefully. "The 30 days started 10 days ago. Whatever that process looks like, whatever the negotiated structure ends up being, I want you to know that I'll be giving an accurate account of everything." She paused. "The choice you made in the street, the statement, Marcus, the way you conducted yourself through all of it. The accurate account includes all of those things." Silence. Then quietly, "You already told me that." "I know. I wanted to say it again." A pause. "Eva." His voice had the quality it got when he was about to say something he had been carrying for a while. "The conversation you mentioned, the one that wasn't about the case." "Yes. I'd like to have it soon." Another pause. "Whatever the next 30 days look like, whatever the review produces, I'd like to have it before those things resolve, not after." Not because I think the outcome is going to be, I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but because after might be a long time away, she said. Yes. She looked out the car window at the city moving past. The diner on Alcott Street, she said. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. A pause. The coffee is terrible, he said. I know, she said. I'll ask for tea. She heard it again, that very quiet sound that was close to a laugh and wasn't quite. It landed in her chest the way it always landed. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, she confirmed. She ended the call. She sat in the moving car and felt the weight of everything that was in motion crosses travel restrictions going up in the next few hours. The 72-hour arrest window, the documentation in Marsh's conference room, the federal review, with 20 days remaining on its initial period, the plea negotiations with Bond's attorney next week, Cole's formal sentencing hearing. In 6 weeks, the internal affairs investigation still working through the Black Ridge PD, like a slow and necessary fire. All of it moving. All of it requiring exactly what it required. She was a detective. She let it move. Senator Raymond Cross was arrested on a Thursday morning at 6:47 in the private terminal of an airport 2 states from Washington, with a carry-on bag that contained 4 passports and enough cash to constitute its own kind of statement. Eva was not at the arrest. She was at her desk in the federal building reading the real-time report from Marsh's team, with the focus of someone who had been building toward this moment for long enough that its arrival felt both inevitable and entirely unexpected in the specific way that things do when they finally happen. She read the arrest report twice. She sat back in her chair. Then she called Vass. It happened, she said when Vass answered. She heard Vass exhale a long, slow breath, the sound of 18 months of work finding its landing. Airport terminal, Vass said. Private terminal. He had 4 passports. A pause. Of course he did. Then, Detective Marlowe, thank you for moving as fast as you did. Thank you for bringing it to us, Eva said, and for giving us the hour to act before you published anything. 18 months, Vass said simply. I wanted it done right. Publishing prematurely and watching him walk away on a procedural issue would have been... She stopped. I wanted it done right. It's done right, Eva said. She ended the call. Marsh appeared in her office doorway 11 minutes later with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of someone who had been awake since 4 in the morning and was running on the specific fuel of a completed operation. She set 1 cup on Eva's desk. Press conference at 10, Marsh said. The Attorney General is flying in. This is going to be... She paused, searching for the word significant. I know. You'll be at the press conference. Do I have a choice? No. Marsh sat down across from her. Eva, before the press conference, before the AG arrives, and this becomes what it becomes. She held Eva's gaze. How are you? It was the 3rd time Marsh had asked her that across the entire span of this case. The first time Eva had been running on adrenaline and forward momentum, and the answer had been complicated and compressed. The second time she had said, I'm working on it. This time she thought about it honestly, sat with it for a real moment, gave it the genuine attention the question deserved. Better, she said. Marsh nodded. Good. I'm also going to be significantly better when Cole's sentencing is done, and Bond's plea is finalized, and the internal affairs investigation finishes working through the department, Eva said. Those things are still ahead. I know they're still ahead. They are, Marsh confirmed. But the architecture is exposed, the whole structure. Cross Ven Bon Petit, the network across 4 cities, the 12 officers, the financial infrastructure. She paused. You built the case. Everything that followed built on what you built. Eva looked at her desk, at the files, at the new file she had opened 3 weeks ago, with Senator Raymond Cross's name at the top. We built it, she said. Marsh looked at her for a moment. Yes, she said. We did. Chapter away. The press conference was exactly what Marsh had said it would be: significant, in the specific, exhausting way that press conferences were significant when they involved a sitting United States senator being arrested at an airport with 4 passports. Eva stood to Marsh's left on the steps of the federal building and answered the questions she was asked with the precision and brevity she had always brought to public statements: factual, accurate, nothing beyond what the moment required. The AG was beside her and said the right things in the measured language of someone who understood that what was said here would be examined for years. The cameras were everywhere. The questions came fast and overlapping. Eva answered the ones directed at her and deflected the ones that reached beyond what was established. And when the press conference finally ended and they moved back inside, she felt the specific exhaustion of someone who had been performing composure for 45 minutes and was ready to stop performing it. She found a quiet office down the hall and sat in it alone for 10 minutes. She thought about a dark street. She thought about a man who had stopped his car. She thought about 14 months of work and 4 days of surviving and 20 days of formal process, and the fact that in approximately 8 hours she was going to sit across a table from that man in a diner with terrible coffee and have the conversation that wasn't about the case. She wasn't sure what that conversation was going to look like. She was a detective. She worked in evidence. The evidence so far said this man had chosen her life over his own exposure twice, once in the street and once in a formal statement room. He had refused to erase a loyal employee from a federal record to protect himself. He had sat in a diner booth and told her the truth about why he stopped the car in a voice that had no performance in it. That was the evidence. She had been building a picture from it. She knew what the picture was starting to look like. She let herself know it. Then she stood up and went back to work. At 7 o'clock, she walked into the diner on Alcott Street, and Damien was already there. He was in the same corner booth as the last time, which she noted and which she suspected was not accidental. He stood when she came in, not because of ceremony, she understood, but because that was who he was when the performance layer came off the person underneath the organization and the reputation and the 20 years of accumulated decisions. She sat down. He sat down. The waitress came. Eva ordered tea. Damien ordered coffee and looked at it when it arrived with the expression of someone who had known what he was getting into and had gotten into it anyway. "You watched the press conference," Eva said. "I did." "And you were composed," he said, "which I expected." A pause. "You also looked like someone who had been awake for approximately 20 hours and was maintaining composure through an act of pure will." 22 hours, she said. "Impressive." "Terrible," she said. "But here." He looked at her. "Here," he agreed. The diner moved around them, the same ordinary dinner-hour life that had moved around them 3 weeks ago. People eating and talking and existing in the uncomplicated way of people who were not in the middle of federal cases or consequential conversations. "The review," Eva said. 20 days are up at the end of the week." "I know." "What does your attorney say?" Damien picked up the coffee and held it. "She says the voluntary cooperation, the separation of my activities from Bond's unauthorized operations, and the accuracy and completeness of the statement are all factors that work in my favor in terms of the structure of the proceedings." He paused. "She also says I'm still looking at significant exposure on the organizational charges and that I should be prepared for an extended process." "Extended how long?" "Potentially years," he said. "Between the federal review, the asset proceedings, and whatever plea structure gets negotiated." He set the coffee down. "It's not going to be clean or fast." Eva looked at him. "Are you afraid?" The question came out direct without the professional softening she would normally have applied. It came out the way it came out because they were not in a formal context, and she had decided somewhere between the press conference and the walk to this diner that the conversation that wasn't about the case was going to be an honest one. He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. Then, correcting himself, "That's not exactly right. I'm not afraid of the process. I've spent 20 years operating in situations where the consequences of a wrong decision were immediate and physical. Federal proceedings are slow and procedural, and I have good legal representation." He paused. "What I'm not certain about is the other side of it. What comes after?" "After the process. After everything." He looked at her directly. "I built something in this city. It wasn't legal and it wasn't clean, but it was mine, and I understood every part of it. What I don't know is who I am without it." He said it without self-pity, without performance, just the clean, factual statement of a man confronting an honest uncertainty. "I'm 44 years old. I've spent 20 years being one specific thing. When that thing is gone—" He stopped. "You're still the person who stopped the car," Eva said. He looked at her. "That didn't come from the organization," she said. "That didn't come from 20 years of being one specific thing. That came from—" She paused, finding the right words. "From the part of you that existed before any of it. The part that couldn't leave that in the street." He was very still. "That part doesn't go away when the proceedings are done," she said. "That's the part you build from." A long silence. Outside the diner window, the city was doing its evening thing. The particular quality of city light at 7 o'clock, the movement of people heading home or heading out, the ordinary ongoing life of a place that was slowly and imperfectly beginning to hold its own history accountable. "You're a detective," Damien said. "Yes." "You spend your life building cases against people like me." "I do." "And you're sitting in this diner telling me—" "I'm telling you what's true," she said. "I told you from the beginning that I dealt in what was accurate. This is accurate." She held his gaze. "You're still a criminal. You ran an organization that operated outside the law for 20 years, and those facts carry consequences. And I am not pretending otherwise, and you are not asking me to." She paused. "But you are also the man who made a choice in a dark street that saved my life, and helped expose a network that was poisoning this city at its root. Both of those things are true at the same time. I'm not interested in a version of reality where only one of them exists." He looked at her for a long moment. "Most people would not say that," he said. "Most people aren't detectives who spent 4 days working a federal operation with the man they're talking about," she said. "I have evidence. I work from evidence." Something moved in his expression, that very particular thing she had been watching for weeks. The thing that lived underneath the stillness. The thing that arrived when the moment was real enough to reach it. "Eva," he said. "What?" "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Whatever this is, I don't have a framework for it." "Neither do I," she said. "That's not reassuring." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." She picked up her tea. "But I've been building things without a complete framework for 14 months, and they've held up so far." He looked at her for another long moment. Then, very quietly, that almost laugh. The one she had been hearing for weeks. The one that meant something she had stopped pretending she didn't know the meaning of. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. They sat in the diner with the terrible coffee, and the decent tea, and the city moving outside the window, and neither of them said anything for a little while. And the silence was not empty, but full. Full of everything that had been said, and everything that had led to this booth, and the particular weight and texture of two people sitting with a complicated reality and choosing not to look away from it. The weeks that followed moved in the layered way that aftermaths moved. Bond accepted a plea that touched all 47 counts. His attorney had tried for 42. Marsh had held firm, and in the end, the evidence had been too complete for the argument to sustain itself. Bond would not see the outside of a federal facility for the remainder of what the sentencing guidelines suggested would be a very long time. Senator Raymond Cross was indicted on 11 counts. His attorneys were already constructing arguments that Eva recognized as the work of very expensive legal talent paid to make something prosecutable look uncertain, and she spent 2 weeks working with federal prosecutors to close every gap those arguments might find. She closed them. She was thorough. She was always thorough. Venn was removed from the bench pending his own grand jury proceeding, which was expected to result in indictment within 60 days. Ryan Cole was sentenced to 14 years. His cooperation had been extensive and genuine, and the judge had noted both facts on the record. 14 years was not nothing. It was also not what he had tried to do to Eva Marlowe in a dark street, and she understood the gap between those two things and accepted it the way she accepted all things that were not clean but were accurate as the real version, the one that existed in the world, rather than in the version of the world where everything resolved without remainder. She went to the sentencing. Cole looked at her when the sentence was read. She held his gaze. She did not look away, and she did not look forgiving, and she did not look cold. She looked like what she was, a detective who had done her job completely and was still doing it, and who understood that the job included sitting in that room and letting the process be what the process was. Cole nodded once. She nodded once in return. That was all. The internal affairs investigation worked through the Black Ridge PD for 3 months. 9 officers were dismissed and faced criminal charges. 3 were cleared. The remaining officers, the ones who had been in the building while corruption moved through its hallways, and who had not known, and who had not been told, those officers had to carry the weight of working in an institution that had failed them, and that weight was its own kind of consequence that nobody's sentencing guidelines could fully account for. The department began rebuilding. It was slow and imperfect, and the rebuilding looked like rebuilding, messy and incomplete, full of the kinds of structural questions that don't have clean answers. Eva returned to full duty in the 4th month. She was given a case on her first day back, a cold homicide from 2 years ago, a case that had gone cold for reasons that the internal affairs investigation had made obvious in retrospect, and she opened the file and sat with it and started building. She was good at building. She was good at the long work. The federal review of Damian Vale's organization concluded in the 5th month. The negotiated structure, the product of his voluntary cooperation, the documentation he had provided, the formal statement, the careful separation of his own activities from Bond's unauthorized operations, was not simple, and was not clean, and was not the kind of outcome that anyone could look at and call justice in any perfectly settled sense. He entered a formal agreement with the federal government. He cooperated with the asset proceedings. The organization was dissolved. The shell companies were exposed and their assets seized. The infrastructure that had taken 20 years to build was dismantled over the course of 4 months by people who were very good at dismantling things. Marcus entered his own cooperation agreement and received a sentence that was suspended, given the specific circumstances of his involvement in the vault evidence preservation. Sorrell cooperated fully and was not charged. Lena Reyes, whose work had been entirely medical and whose involvement had been the preservation of a life, was not a subject of any proceeding. What Damian received at the end of the formal process was not freedom in the uncomplicated sense. What he received was a structured agreement that carried conditions and supervision and a timeline, and that existed within the law rather than outside it for the first time in 20 years. Eva was not part of those proceedings professionally. She had given her accurate account and stepped back from the review because the professional distance that the situation required was real, and she maintained it the way she maintained all professional distances, completely without exception, and with the full understanding that maintaining it was the right thing regardless of what it cost her personally. It cost her something. She maintained it anyway. That was who she was. The first time she saw him after the review was concluded was a Saturday morning in late spring, in a coffee shop near the east side. Not the diner with the terrible coffee, a different place. One that neither of them had history in yet, which she thought might be the point. He was already there. He stood when she came in. He looked different than he had in the federal building, different than he had in the car and the facility and the diner, and all the other contexts in which she had known him across the compressed and consequential months of this thing. He looked like a man who had put down something very heavy and was still calibrating what his posture was without it. She sat down across from him. "How's the coffee?" she said. He looked at his cup. "Better than the diner." "High bar. Extremely." He agreed. She ordered tea. She looked at him. He looked at her. The coffee shop moved around them with the uncomplicated Saturday morning energy of people who were living their ordinary lives. And she thought about all the distance between this moment and a dark street 11 months ago, and felt the weight of that distance without being crushed by it. "How are you?" she said. He thought about it. Honest answer. Always. "Strange," he said. "I spent 20 years knowing exactly what I was and what I was doing and what each day was going to require of me. Now every day is—" He paused. "I don't have a word for it yet." "Open," she said. He looked at her. "Every day is open," she said. "You don't have a word for it because you haven't had it before. It doesn't feel like anything you recognize yet." She paused. "It gets less strange." "Is that from experience?" "It's from the past 11 months, she said. "I didn't know what the other side of this case was going to look like. I built toward it without knowing what I was building toward." She looked at him directly. "It gets less strange, and then it starts to become something." He was quiet for a long moment. "Something," he said. "Something," she confirmed. He looked at her with the full quality of attention that she had been the subject of for 11 months. The kind of attention that didn't perform itself, that simply was. That came from a place underneath the organization, and the reputation, and the 20 years, and all the choices that had led here. "Eva," he said. "What?" "I'd like to figure out what something looks like," he said. "If you're willing." She looked at him. She thought about evidence. She thought about what the evidence had been building toward since a dark street and a stopped car, and a choice that changed everything it touched. "I'm willing," she said. Outside the coffee shop window, Black Ridge City was doing what it did on a Saturday morning in late spring, moving and breathing and carrying itself forward, imperfect and damaged, and in the slow, ongoing process of becoming something more honest than it had been. The people in it were living their lives inside a system that was being rebuilt from its exposed foundations up, and the rebuilding was real, and the rebuilding was incomplete, and the rebuilding was the only version of it that mattered. Inside the coffee shop, at a table by the window, a detective and a man who had stopped being one thing and not yet become the next thing sat across from each other and drank their respective beverages and began without preamble and without a framework the careful work of figuring out what something looked like. It was not going to be simple. It was not going to be clean. But it was going to be real. And in a city that had spent 11 years being lied to by the people and institutions that were supposed to tell it the truth, real was the only thing that was worth building from. That was what Eva Marlowe knew. That was what she had always known. And on a Saturday morning in late spring, with the city beginning to hold itself accountable, and the work continuing, and the future genuinely open in the way that things are open when they have been honestly earned, she was exactly where the truth had led her. Where it always led people who refused to stop following it. All the way to the end. And then forward still.